They said nobody could touch Vincent Caruso. They were wrong. In the heart of Chicago's most ruthless empire, a crime lord who's never lost a fight is about to meet his match, and she's wearing a waitress apron. One spilled drink, one public humiliation, one impossible victory that will shatter everything he thought he knew about power. But when the woman who destroyed him vanishes into the night, Vincent Caruso will hunt her down and make her an offer that could either save her life or end it. This is a story of violence, survival, and the thin line between enemy and equal. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Velvet Throne wasn't the kind of place you stumbled into by accident. It sat in the industrial bowels of Chicago's South Side, tucked between a shuttered meatpacking plant and a rail yard that hadn't seen legitimate cargo in 15 years. No sign outside. No bouncer at the door. Because if you didn't already know where it was, you weren't supposed to be there. The building itself looked like every other warehouse on the block. Brick facade gone black with soot, windows either boarded or shattered. Graffiti tags layered so thick they formed their own abstract mural. But inside it was a different world entirely. The main floor had been gutted and rebuilt as a temple to excess. Mahogany paneling stripped from some mansion's library covered the walls. Crystal chandeliers, real ones, not the cheap knockoffs, hung from chains bolted into the exposed steel beams overhead. The bar ran the length of the east wall, backlit bottles arranged like soldiers on parade, each one worth more than most people made in a month. Leather booths lined the perimeter, and in the center, a sunken lounge area surrounded a performance space that had hosted everything from jazz quartets to cage fights. Tonight, it hosted Vincent Caruso. He sat in the largest booth, the one positioned to see every entrance and exit, his back to the only solid wall in the room. Standard precaution, the kind of habit that kept you breathing in his line of work. He was 34 but carried himself with the weariness of someone twice that age. Not physically broken, just experienced in the particular ways the world wore you down when your business was violence and intimidation. Vincent wasn't massive, not in the cartoonish way people expected from crime bosses. 6'1", maybe 200 pounds, built like someone who'd spent years in boxing gyms rather than bodybuilding studios. His suit was tailored within an inch of its life, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, the kind of thing that cost $5,000 and looked like it cost nothing at all. Dark hair slicked back, jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes the color of winter ice, the kind that didn't warm even when he smiled, which wasn't often. He wasn't smiling now. 4 men sat with him, arranged in a careful hierarchy that anyone familiar with the organization would recognize immediately. To his right, Marcus Webb, second in command, 6'3" and built like a truck, with hands that could palm a basketball and a face that had stopped too many punches to ever be called handsome. Across from Vincent sat Tommy Chen, the money man, mid-40s with wire-rimmed glasses and the permanent expression of someone doing complex math in his head. The other two were muscle, interchangeable enforcers whose names didn't matter as much as their willingness to break bones when instructed. They were discussing territory. "Battaglia is pushing west," Marcus said, his voice like gravel in a blender. 3 blocks past the line we agreed on. His people are collecting from shops that pay us. Vincent lifted his glass, single malt, 18 years old, no ice, and took a slow sip before responding. "How much?" "Protection money? Maybe $6,000 a month total from those blocks." "Not the money." "How many of his people?" Marcus shifted his weight, the leather booth creaking under him. 8, maybe 10. Street-level guys, nobody important. "Nobody's unimportant if they're on our blocks collecting our money." Vincent set his glass down with controlled precision. "Send a message. Don't kill anyone, but make sure Battaglia gets the bill for whatever medical costs result. And make sure it's expensive enough that he thinks twice before trying again." Tommy Chen cleared his throat. "About Battaglia, there's something else. He's been making noise about the tournament." That got Vincent's attention. His eyes, previously half focused on the room while listening to Marcus, sharpened to full intensity on Tommy's face. "What kind of noise?" "Wants a seat at the table. Says he's got a fighter who could make things interesting, and he's willing to put up $50,000 as a show of good faith." Vincent almost laughed. Almost. Battaglia doesn't have $50,000 in liquid cash, and he sure as hell doesn't have a fighter worth betting on. What's he really after? "Legitimacy," Tommy said immediately. He wants to be seen as a player. The tournament gives him that, gets him in the room with people who matter, makes him look bigger than he is. And if we say no, then he'll keep pushing boundaries until we push back hard enough to make it stop. We've seen this before. Small-time operator gets ambitious, starts thinking he's outgrown his station, usually ends one of two ways. Vincent knew both ways. Either the ambitious operator got slapped down hard enough to remember their place, or they kept escalating until someone ended up dead. Neither option was ideal. Dead bodies drew attention, and attention was bad for business, but sometimes you didn't get to choose. Put him on the wait list, Vincent said after a moment. Tell him we're considering his request, but we need to verify his fighter's credentials first. That'll buy us a few weeks to figure out if he's serious or just making noise. Tommy nodded, making a note on his phone. The conversation shifted to other business. A shipment coming in from the West Coast, a police captain who needed his monthly envelope adjusted, a dispute between two bookies over territory. Vincent listened with half his attention, the other half scanning the room in the unconscious habit of someone who'd survived this long by never being caught off guard. That's when he saw her. Not immediately. Not like some lightning bolt moment where everything else faded away and violins started playing. Nothing that dramatic. She was just another server, one of maybe a dozen working the floor tonight, carrying a tray of drinks from the bar to a table near the far wall. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, plain face. Not ugly, not beautiful, just unremarkable in the way most people were unremarkable. White shirt, black vest, black slacks. The uniform was identical to every other server's, and she moved through the crowd with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. Vincent wouldn't have noticed her at all if she hadn't stumbled. It was subtle. Just a slight hitch in her step as someone's chair scraped backward into her path. Most people would have crashed or at least sloshed the drinks on her tray. She didn't. Her balance shifted in a way that looked almost deliberate, weight redistributing, tray tilting just enough to compensate before settling back level. The entire adjustment took maybe half a second. But Vincent saw it. Saw the way her center of gravity dropped. Saw the slight pivot in her hips that turned a collision into a near miss. Saw the controlled recovery that suggested training, not luck. Interesting. He watched her deliver the drinks. 4 of them, distributed to a table of businessmen who barely acknowledged her existence, and then turned back toward the bar. Her movement was efficient, economical. No wasted motion. She didn't weave through the crowd so much as flow through gaps in it, reading the room's rhythm and slipping into empty spaces before they closed. Also interesting. Vincent was still watching when she approached the bar, when the bartender, a kid named Danny, who'd been working here maybe 3 months, loaded her tray with a new round. 6 glasses this time, arranged in 2 rows of 3. One of them was Vincent's preferred scotch, which meant the tray was headed his direction. She turned, tray balanced on her left palm, and started across the room. That's when someone grabbed her ass. Vincent saw it happen. Some drunk idiot in an expensive suit, sitting with 3 equally drunk idiots, reached out as she passed and grabbed a handful. She jerked forward, the tray tilting, glasses sliding. Her right hand shot out to steady it, but overcorrected, and suddenly, gravity was winning. The entire tray upended directly onto Vincent Caruso's lap. 6 glasses worth of alcohol, including his 18-year scotch, soaked into his $5,000 suit. Ice cubes bounced off the table and onto the floor. The sound of breaking glass cut through the bar's ambient noise like a gunshot. The room didn't go silent. The velvet throne was too big for that, too many conversations happening simultaneously, but their immediate area sure as hell did. Every person within 15 feet stopped talking and turned to look. Vincent sat perfectly still, whiskey dripping off his jacket onto the leather seat. His expression hadn't changed, hadn't even flickered. He just sat there, soaked and motionless, looking at the woman who'd just dumped a small fortune worth of alcohol onto one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. Mara Quinn's face had gone absolutely white. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately, grabbing napkins from the dispenser on the table and starting to dab at the spreading stain. "I'm so sorry. It was an accident. Someone grabbed—" "Don't touch me." Vincent's voice was quiet, calm. The kind of calm that made smart people nervous because it suggested reserves of violence being held in check by nothing more than choice. Mara froze, napkins clutched in both hands, and stepped back. Marcus was already moving, rising from his seat with the slow deliberateness of a landslide. You want me to handle this? No. Vincent still hadn't moved, hadn't looked away from Mara's face. I'll handle it myself. He stood, whiskey dripping from his jacket, and every eye in their section of the room tracked the movement. When Vincent Caruso stood up after someone disrespected him, things tended to get ugly fast. But he didn't reach for her, didn't grab her arm or shove her, or any of the things Mara's body was clearly bracing for. He just stood there, ice-water eyes locked on her face, studying her with the intensity of someone trying to read a foreign language. What's your name? Mara. Her voice was steady despite the fear written across her face. Points for that. Mara Quinn. How long have you worked here, Mara Quinn? 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Vincent tilted his head slightly, like a predator examining prey from a new angle. And in those 3 weeks, has anyone explained to you who I am? Yes? Then you understand the magnitude of your mistake. It wasn't a question, but Mara nodded anyway. The drunk who'd grabbed her, Vincent could see him now, sweating bullets 3 tables over, was trying very hard to look invisible. Smart man. This wasn't his problem anymore. He'd successfully made it someone else's. Vincent took a step closer to Mara. Not threatening, exactly, but definitely invading her personal space in a way that made most people instinctively retreat. Mara didn't retreat. She didn't advance either, didn't do anything aggressive or stupid. Just held her ground, feet planted shoulder-width apart in a stance that looked natural but definitely wasn't. Vincent had been in enough fights to recognize a trained posture when he saw one. Very interesting. You know what I think, Mara Quinn? Vincent's voice was conversational now, almost friendly, which somehow made it more unsettling. I think you're not just a waitress. The way you caught yourself when that chair almost hit you, that wasn't luck. The way you're standing right now, even though you're scared, that's not how normal people stand when they're scared. So either you've got some training, or you're just naturally gifted at not falling over. Mara said nothing. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent continued. You've embarrassed me in front of my people. That can't stand. So you're going to make it right. I'll pay for the cleaning, Mara said quickly. And replacement drinks, and I don't want your money. Vincent glanced at Marcus, then at the cleared space in the center of the room where the performance area sat empty. I want entertainment. You're going to fight me. The words hung in the air for 3 full seconds before Mara processed them. What? You heard me. Right here, right now. You and me. We put on a show for my people, and if you last more than 30 seconds, we'll call your debt paid. Mara's face had gone from white to ashen. I can't. I'm not. You're not what? A fighter? Vincent smiled for the first time, and it was the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Then this should be over very quickly. But I saw the way you moved. You've got training, so let's see what you can do with it. No. Mara's voice was firm despite the fear. I'm not fighting you. Then you're fired and banned from every establishment I control, which in this city is most of them. And I'll make sure every other club owner knows exactly why. That you're clumsy, careless, and cost me a $5,000 suit. Vincent's smile widened slightly. Or you can fight me for 30 seconds and walk away with your job and your reputation intact. Your choice. It was a trap, and they both knew it. If she refused, she was blacklisted and probably unemployed for the foreseeable future. If she accepted, she was going to get humiliated, or worse, in front of a crowd of people who'd remember it forever. But there was something else in Vincent's eyes. Something Mara couldn't quite identify. Curiosity, maybe. Or anticipation. Like he wasn't just looking forward to beating her, he was looking forward to seeing if she'd surprise him. Mara looked at the performance space, then back at Vincent, then at Marcus's massive frame looming in her peripheral vision. She was trapped, and she knew it. Fine, she said quietly. 30 seconds. The crowd that gathered was immediate and enthusiastic. Word spread fast in the Velvet Throne. Vincent Caruso was about to beat down some waitress who'd spilled drinks on him, and everyone wanted to see it. People abandoned their tables, their conversations, their drinks. Within 2 minutes, the performance area was surrounded by a 3-deep ring of spectators, all of them talking and laughing and placing bets on how quickly this was going to be over. The smart money was on under 15 seconds. Vincent shrugged out of his soaked jacket and handed it to Marcus, then rolled up his sleeves with methodical precision. The white dress shirt underneath had escaped most of the alcohol, but his pants were a lost cause. He didn't seem bothered. Mara stood on the opposite side of the cleared space, arms at her sides, looking like she wanted to be literally anywhere else. She'd taken off her vest and set it aside, but otherwise hadn't changed anything about her appearance. Still looked like a scared waitress who'd stumbled into something way over her head, which was exactly what made Vincent suspicious. "Rules are simple," he announced loud enough for the crowd to hear. "No weapons, no biting, no eye gouging. Everything else is fair game. 30 seconds on the clock. If you're still standing when time's up, you win. If you go down, I win. Everybody clear?" Mara nodded. Tommy Chen, who'd appointed himself timekeeper, held up his phone. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. Vincent moved first. He wasn't some brawler who relied on size and strength to overwhelm opponents. He'd been boxing since he was 12 years old, had spent his teens and 20s in gyms learning from people who'd actually competed at high levels. He knew how to throw a punch properly, how to move his feet, how to read an opponent's tells and exploit their weaknesses. So he started with a jab. Not a haymaker, not some wild swing, just a quick, controlled punch aimed at Mara's face to test her reaction time. She slipped it, not by much, just a slight tilt of her head, barely an inch of movement, but enough that his fist passed through empty air where her nose had been a fraction of a second earlier. Vincent's follow-up left hook was already in motion, targeting her body, and this time, she wasn't there. Mara had shifted her weight, pivoted on her back foot, and suddenly she was 3 inches to the left of where Vincent's proprioception insisted she should be. His punch missed again, and now he was slightly overextended. His balance committed forward in a way that left him momentarily vulnerable. She didn't exploit it, didn't throw a counterpunch or try to sweep his legs or do any of the things a trained fighter would do when given that kind of opening. She just reset, hands coming up into a guard that looked simultaneously amateur and strangely competent. The crowd's laughter was dying down. People were starting to notice that the scared waitress hadn't been hit yet. Vincent adjusted his assessment. She had training, real training, not some cardio kickboxing class or self-defense seminar. She knew how to read a punch, how to use minimal movement for maximum effect, how to manage distance and angles. Fine. If she wanted to make this interesting, he'd oblige. He threw a combination, jab, cross, hook, putting more speed and power into it. Not full strength yet because he wasn't trying to actually hurt her, but enough to test whether her defense was luck or skill. She blocked the jab with her left forearm, redirected the cross with her right, and ducked under the hook entirely. Then, for the first time, she moved forward instead of back. It was just a step. One quick shuffle that closed the distance between them from 6 feet to 3. She didn't throw a punch, didn't attack at all, just invaded his space and then immediately retreated before he could adjust. Vincent felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Not anger, not quite. More like excitement? When was the last time anyone had surprised him? 15 seconds, Tommy called out. The crowd was getting restless now, confused. This wasn't what they'd expected. The waitress was supposed to be on the ground by now, crying or unconscious or both. Instead, she was... Vincent threw a low kick aimed at her lead leg, the kind that would buckle most people's knee if it landed clean. Mara saw it coming and lifted her foot exactly high enough to let it pass underneath, then stomped down into a wider stance as Vincent's momentum carried him slightly off balance. And that's when she hit him. Not hard. Not a knockout blow or anything close to it. Just a quick, snapping palm strike to his chest that landed while he was mid-recovery, pushing him backward a single step. The impact was negligible. He'd been hit harder during warm-ups at the gym, but she'd hit him, in front of everyone. The crowd went silent. Vincent's eyes narrowed. Okay, enough playing around. He came at her again, faster this time, throwing punches with the kind of speed and precision that had won him amateur titles back when he still competed. Jab, jab, cross, uppercut, hook. Combinations that flowed together with practiced ease, each one designed to set up the next, creating a chain of attacks that was supposed to be overwhelming. Mara's defense collapsed, or at least that's what it looked like. She blocked the first jab but missed the second, took a glancing blow from the cross, barely avoided the uppercut. She was backpedaling now, arms up in a desperate guard, feet scrambling to maintain balance. Vincent pressed the advantage, sensing victory. He threw a straight right aimed at her face, putting real power into it for the first time. And Mara dropped under it like a trapdoor had opened beneath her feet. 1 second she was there, backing up, overwhelmed. The next second she was in a crouch so low her knuckles almost touched the floor, and Vincent's punch sailed harmlessly over her head with enough force that he felt his shoulder protest. Before he could recover, Mara drove forward from her crouch, shooting in low and fast. Her shoulder hit his midsection just as her arm wrapped around his lead leg, and suddenly Vincent's entire world tilted sideways. He'd been taken down exactly 3 times in his adult life. Twice during training sessions with professional wrestlers, once by a bouncer in Detroit who turned out to be a former college football player. Each time he'd had a split second of warning, enough time to brace himself or at least try to defend. This time, he had no warning at all. Mara executed a perfect single-leg takedown, using his own forward momentum against him, lifting his leg while driving her shoulder into his center mass. Vincent's balance, which had already been compromised by his overpowered punch, completely abandoned him. His arms windmilled uselessly as he fell, and then he was on his back on the hardwood floor with his legs still elevated in Mara's grip. She could have finished it there, could have transitioned to a submission, or dropped down and started throwing punches at his exposed face, or any number of things that would have ended the fight decisively. Instead, she let go of his leg and stepped back, hands up in a non-aggressive guard. 25 seconds, Tommy said, his voice barely audible over the sudden roar of the crowd. Vincent lay on his back for maybe 2 full seconds, staring at the chandelier overhead, trying to process what had just happened. Then he rolled to his feet in one smooth motion, his face completely unreadable. Mara was backing toward the edge of the performance area, her eyes locked on Vincent's, clearly deciding whether to run or stay. The crowd was going absolutely insane now, shouting, laughing, a few people chanting "holy shit" like it was a religious mantra. "Time," Tommy announced. 30 seconds. Vincent stood perfectly still in the center of the space, his white shirt untucked, his hair disheveled for probably the first time in a decade. He was breathing hard, not exhausted, but definitely exerted, and his eyes were locked on Mara's face with an intensity that made her take another half step backward. Nobody was laughing at him. The crowd had gone from raucous to uncertain, everyone waiting to see how Vincent Caruso would respond to being humiliated by a waitress. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet enough that only the people closest could hear. "What's your real name?" Mara blinked. "What?" "Your real name. Because Mara Quinn might be what's on your employment paperwork, but it's not who you are. Nobody moves like that without serious training, and serious training means serious background. So I'll ask again. What's your real name?" Mara's jaw tightened. "I don't know what your—" "Don't." Vincent took 1 step toward her, and despite having just proven she could handle herself in a fight, Mara instinctively retreated. "Don't insult my intelligence. You're not some waitress who took a couple self-defense classes. That takedown was professional. The way you read my combinations, the way you use distance and angles, that's high-level training. So either tell me who you really are, or I'll find out myself, and you won't like the methods I use." The crowd was pressing closer now, sensing drama. Marcus had moved to Vincent's left, cutting off one potential exit. 2 other enforcers had materialized near the main entrance. Mara's eyes darted between them, calculating odds that were rapidly deteriorating. "I'm nobody," she said finally. "Just someone trying to stay invisible." "Well, you failed spectacularly at that." Vincent's expression was still unreadable, but something in his tone had shifted. 30 seconds. That was the deal. You lasted 30 seconds, so your debt's paid and you keep your job. But this conversation isn't over. You and I are going to talk, somewhere private, about exactly who you are and what you're doing working for minimum wage in my club when you clearly have other skills. And if I refuse? Then you walk out that door right now, and by tomorrow morning, every criminal organization in this city will know that Vincent Caruso is looking for a woman matching your description who fights like a professional. How long do you think it'll take before someone connects the dots? Before your real identity surfaces? Before whatever you're running from catches up? It was a threat wrapped in logic, and they both knew it. Mara's face had gone pale again, but this time it wasn't fear of Vincent. It was fear of exposure, of consequences that extended far beyond this room. 1 hour, Vincent said, making the decision for her. You finish your shift, then we talk in my office upstairs. Just you and me. No audience, no witnesses. You tell me the truth about who you are, and I'll decide whether that truth is a problem for me." He turned and walked back toward his booth without waiting for an answer, Marcus and the other enforcers falling into formation around him. The crowd parted like a biblical sea, everyone suddenly very interested in their drinks or their phones or literally anything except making eye contact with Vincent Caruso. Mara stood alone in the performance area, surrounded by empty space, very aware that every person in the room had just watched her do something impossible. She'd beaten Vincent Caruso, and now she was going to pay for it. But the next hour was the longest of Mara's life. She went through the motions of her shift on autopilot, taking orders, delivering drinks, clearing tables, while her mind raced through increasingly desperate scenarios. She could run, grab her jacket from the employee locker, walk out the back exit, and disappear into Chicago's labyrinth of streets and alleys. She'd done it before, in other cities, when things got too hot or too complicated. But Vincent had been right about one thing. Running would only buy her time, not safety. If he put the word out that he was looking for her, every two-bit hustler and wannabe tough guy in the city would be searching for a big payday. And if they started digging into who she really was, no. Running wasn't an option, not anymore. The office was on the third floor, accessible by a stairwell that required a key card to access. Mara had never been up there, hadn't even known there were upper floors until Danny the bartender had mentioned it in passing during her first week. According to him, that's where Vincent handled real business, whatever that meant. When her shift ended, she found Marcus waiting by the stairwell door, his massive frame blocking most of the hallway. He didn't say anything, just gestured for her to follow and swiped his card through the reader. The lock clicked open. The stairs were narrow and poorly lit, institutional in a way that contrasted sharply with the club's opulent main floor. Their footsteps echoed off bare concrete walls as they climbed. One flight, two flights, three. At the top, another locked door, another card swipe. The third floor was nothing like Mara had imagined. She'd been expecting something ostentatious, gold fixtures, expensive art, maybe a leather chair the size of a small car. Instead, it looked like a corporate office that had been furnished by someone with more money than taste. Clean lines, minimal decoration, everything in shades of gray and black and white. A desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of dark wood. Bookshelves filled with actual books, not the fake decorator kind. A sitting area with two chairs positioned across from each other. Vincent stood by the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. He changed clothes, the whiskey-soaked suit replaced by dark slacks and a different white shirt, this one with the sleeves already rolled up. He didn't turn when Mara entered. Marcus closed the door behind her with a soft click that sounded very final. "Sit," Vincent said, still looking out the window. Mara sat in one of the chairs, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. The position felt vulnerable, but standing would have felt worse, like she was preparing for another fight, which was the last thing she wanted to signal right now. Vincent finally turned, but he didn't sit, just leaned against the window frame, arms crossed, studying her with that same unsettling intensity from downstairs. "I've been thinking," he said after a long moment, "about what kind of training produces the skill set you demonstrated tonight. It's not boxing, your hands were all wrong for that. Not traditional martial arts either, too practical. Not enough form. Combat sports maybe, but refined. Probably multiple disciplines integrated together." He paused, clearly waiting for her to fill the silence. When she didn't, he continued, "Mixed martial arts. That's my guess. High level too. Not amateur hour. You've spent years training, probably competed somewhere, which means there's footage, records. A trail that leads back to whoever you were before you became Mara Quinn, minimum wage waitress." Mara's throat felt tight, but she kept her expression neutral. "Lots of people train MMA. Sure, but most people don't work service jobs under fake names while hiding in shitty Chicago neighborhoods. Most people who can fight like you either make money doing it legally, or they work for people like me doing it illegally. You're doing neither, which means you're running from something, or someone." He moved from the window to the chair across from her, sitting down with fluid grace. Up close like this, Mara could see details she'd missed before. The scar tissue on his knuckles from years of hitting things. The faint line across his left eyebrow where something had split the skin badly enough to need stitches. The way his eyes never quite relaxed, even when the rest of his face did. "Here's what I think happened," Vincent said. "You were someone. Maybe not famous, but known in certain circles. You competed, you won, you made a name for yourself, and then something went wrong. Bad enough that you had to disappear. Bad enough that you're willing to work for $12 an hour plus tips just to stay off the radar." Mara said nothing. So the question becomes, what could be bad enough to make you walk away from a career you clearly spent years building? Debt? Possible, but usually people in debt try to make more money, not less. Legal trouble? Maybe. But if you were wanted by the police, you'd be more careful about public fights in crowded rooms. Which leaves personal trouble. Someone's looking for you, someone dangerous enough that you'd rather scrub tables than risk being found. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "Am I close?" Mara met his eyes, held them. "Does it matter?" "It does if your personal trouble becomes my professional problem. I've got enough complications without inheriting someone else's vendetta or blood feud or whatever the hell you're hiding from." "Then fire me. I'll leave tonight. You'll never see me again." "But that's the thing. I don't want to fire you." Vincent smiled, and this time there was something almost genuine in it. Amusement, maybe, or appreciation. "You dropped me on my ass in front of 50 people, and instead of being furious about it, I'm fascinated. Do you know how rare that is? How few people in this city would dare to do what you did, even by accident?" "It wasn't by accident." The words were out before Mara could stop them, and she watched Vincent's smile widen. "No," he agreed. "It wasn't. You saw an opportunity and you took it. Consequences be damned. That takes either stupidity or confidence, and you don't strike me as stupid. Maybe I'm both. Maybe. Or maybe you're just tired of running." The accuracy of that statement hit Mara like a physical blow. She was tired. Exhausted, actually. Tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of fake names and cash-only jobs, tired of moving cities every time someone looked at her twice. She'd been doing this for 18 months, and it felt like 18 years. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. Vincent leaned back in his chair considering. "Information. Who you really are. Who you're running from. And whether that person or organization is likely to show up on my doorstep looking for you. And if I tell you, then what? You use it against me? Sell me out to whoever's looking? If I wanted to do that, I'd have made calls already. No, if you tell me and it's nothing that threatens my business, then we come to an arrangement. You keep working here." He held up a hand to stop her protest. "Not as a waitress. Something better suited to your actual skills. Security, maybe. Or training some of my people who think they know how to fight, but actually don't. In exchange, I make sure you stay hidden, my resources, my protection." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "Why?" Mara asked. "Why would you do that?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice had lost some of its calculated edge. "Because I respect what you did tonight. You were cornered, outmatched, in a situation designed to humiliate you, and instead of folding, you won. That's rare. That's valuable. And I don't like wasting valuable things." Mara wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that maybe, finally, she'd found someone who could help instead of hunt. But trust was a luxury she'd given up when she'd fled her old life. "If I tell you," she said slowly, "and you decide I'm more trouble than I'm worth, what happens then? Then I'll give you 24 hours to disappear before I forget this conversation ever happened. Fair?" It wasn't fair, not really, but it was better than most of the alternatives Mara could think of. She took a deep breath, released it, made a decision that would change everything. "My real name is Mara Kincaid," she said. 3 years ago, I was ranked 4th in my weight class in the North American Women's MMA circuit. I had 17 professional fights, 15 wins, 2 losses. I was being talked about as a future championship contender. Vincent's expression didn't change, but she saw recognition flicker in his eyes. He knew the name. Or at least he knew enough about MMA to know it was legitimate. "What happened?" "I was training at a gym in Philadelphia. Elite place, expensive, lot of serious fighters. The owner was a man named Viktor Sokolov, former Russian military, made his money doing..." Things I didn't ask about. He saw potential in me, started covering my training costs, my medical bills, even my rent. Said he was investing in my future. Let me guess, Vincent interrupted. The investment came with strings. The investment came with chains. He wanted me to fight, but not in legitimate promotions. Underground circuits. No rules, no regulations, no oversight. Places where the money was better, but the risks were... She stopped, swallowing hard. People got hurt, really hurt. Sometimes they didn't get up. And you refused. I tried to. But Sokolov made it clear that refusal wasn't an option. I owed him, and he intended to collect. So I did what he wanted. For 6 months, I fought in basements and warehouses and shipping containers. I won every fight because losing meant worse than injury. It meant debt, meant being owned completely. Mara's hands were trembling now. She clasped them tighter together. The last fight, my opponent was a woman from Croatia. Ex-military, like Sokolov. She was bigger than me, stronger. The crowd was betting heavy against me. And during the fight, I realized she was trying to kill me. Not figuratively, literally. She went for my throat, my eyes, used techniques designed to inflict maximum damage. You won, Vincent said. It wasn't a question. I won. But she didn't walk away from it. Traumatic brain injury from repeated strikes to the head. Last I heard, she was in a care facility. Can't remember her own name. Mara's voice had gone hollow. I looked at what I'd done, at what Sokolov had turned me into, and I ran, emptied my bank account, ditched my phone, left everything behind. I've been moving ever since, different cities, different names, always looking over my shoulder. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush diamonds. Finally, Vincent spoke. Sokolov's still looking for you. Sokolov's always looking for his investments, and I'm not the only one who ran, but I'm probably the one he wants back most because I was his best fighter. Losing me cost him a lot of money. How much money? I don't know exactly, but enough that he's put out word in underground circuits across 6 states. 50,000 for information leading to my location, 100,000 for delivery. Vincent whistled low. That's a serious bounty. That's a serious man. He doesn't forgive and he doesn't forget. And if he finds me... Mara didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Vincent stood and walked back to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city lights. Mara watched his reflection in the glass, trying to read his body language, trying to figure out if she'd just signed her own death warrant by trusting him with the truth. Viktor Sokolov, Vincent said eventually. Russian, former military, runs underground fight circuits. I know of him. We've never done business. He operates mainly on the East Coast and I stay west. But I know his reputation. You're right to be scared. So that's it then? 24-hour head start? No. Vincent turned to face her, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite identify. That's not it. Because as it happens, I have a problem that you might be able to help me solve. And if you help me, I'll make Sokolov's bounty irrelevant. Mara felt hope and suspicion war in her chest. What kind of problem? The tournament I mentioned earlier. It's not a metaphor. Once a year, I host an underground fighting tournament. High stakes, big money, draws competitors from all over the country. Legitimate fighters, criminals, mercenaries, anyone who thinks they're tough enough to win. The entry fee is $50,000 per fighter. Winner takes home $500,000 plus bragging rights. He moved back to his chair but didn't sit. This year's tournament is in 3 weeks. I've got most of the roster filled, but I lost my featured attraction, a fighter from Detroit who got arrested 2 days ago on weapons charges. I need a replacement. Someone with legitimate skills who can put on a show, maybe even win the whole thing. Mara's stomach dropped. You want me to fight? I want you to do what you're already good at, what you've been doing for years. Except this time, you do it for me, under my protection, with the understanding that if you win, Sokolov's bounty becomes pocket change compared to your prize money. And if I lose? If you lose, you still get $10,000 just for participating, and you still have my protection as long as you want it. Either way, Sokolov can't touch you. Not in Chicago, not in my territory. I'll make sure of that. It was insane. Completely, utterly insane. Mara had sworn she'd never fight like that again. Never put herself in situations where people got hurt for entertainment and profit. She'd walked away from that life specifically to avoid becoming the thing she'd hated. But she'd also been running for 18 months with no end in sight, working dead-end jobs under fake names, always one step ahead of people who wanted to drag her back into hell. And Vincent was offering her a way out. "I need time to think about it," she said. "You've got until tomorrow night. After that, I need to confirm my roster or find someone else." Vincent extended his hand. "For what it's worth, I think you'd be incredible. And I promise you'll be treated fairly. No interference, no fixing, just you against whoever's across from you. Clean fight, clean money." Mara looked at his offered hand, at the scars on his knuckles, at the man who'd just listened to her confession without judgment or exploitation. She didn't shake his hand. Not yet. "Tomorrow night," she repeated, and stood to leave. Marcus opened the door for her without being asked, and Mara walked through it, down the stairs, out of the building, and into the Chicago night with her head spinning and her future uncertain. Behind her, in his third-floor office, Vincent Caruso smiled to himself and made a phone call. "Tommy? Yeah, it's me. I need you to dig up everything you can find on a fighter named Mara Kincaid. Used to compete in the MMA circuit, disappeared about 18 months ago. And find out what you can about Viktor Sokolov's current operations. I want to know if he's operating anywhere near our territory." He listened to Tommy's questions, then cut him off. "Because we might be going to war and I want to know what we're up against. Get me that information by tomorrow morning." Vincent hung up and returned to the window, watching the distant figure of Mara Quinn, Mara Kincaid, disappear into the city's maze of streets. This was going to be interesting. Mara didn't sleep that night. She sat in her studio apartment, a glorified closet on the 4th floor of a building that should have been condemned 20 years ago, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere she'd never been. The radiator clanked and hissed. Outside, sirens wailed their usual Chicago symphony. Her downstairs neighbor was fighting with someone again, their voices rising and falling through the thin walls like a tide she'd learned to ignore. But tonight, she couldn't ignore anything. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from fear. She was used to fear, had made peace with it months ago. This was something else. Adrenaline, maybe. Or the terrible, dangerous feeling of possibility. Vincent Caruso's offer sat in her brain like a live grenade with the pin half pulled. She'd spent 18 months running, hiding, shrinking herself into corners and hoping nobody would notice. 18 months of fake names and cash-only jobs and always keeping her keys between her fingers when she walked home at night. 18 months of looking over her shoulder for Viktor Sokolov's people, knowing that eventually her luck would run out and she'd see a familiar face in a crowd or feel a hand on her shoulder that meant the running was over. And now Vincent was offering her a way to stop running. All she had to do was fight. Mara stood and walked to the bathroom, 3 steps from the bed, which told you everything you needed to know about the apartment's size. She flipped the light switch. The bulb flickered twice before stabilizing, casting harsh shadows across her reflection in the mirror above the sink. She looked like hell. Dark circles under her eyes from too many nights of broken sleep. Hair that needed washing. A bruise on her left shoulder from where she'd banged into a keg in the Velvet Throne storage room yesterday. Moving too fast. Always moving too fast. She was 29 years old and felt twice that. But when she shifted her weight, dropped into a fighter's stance, feet shoulder width, hands up, chin tucked, the woman in the mirror changed. The exhaustion didn't disappear, but it got pushed down, buried under muscle memory and years of training that her body hadn't forgotten, even if her mind had tried to. She threw a jab, quick, controlled. The motion was still there, still sharp, across. Her hips rotated properly, power transferring from her legs through her core into her fist. A hook. Her feet pivoted, weight shifting, and for just a second she wasn't in a bathroom that smelled like mildew and old pipes. She was in a gym in Philadelphia, young and hungry and convinced she was going to be someone. Before Viktor Sokolov. Before the underground fights. Before she'd learned that some victories cost more than any defeat. Mara's reflection stared back at her, fists still extended, and she realized she was crying, not sobbing, just tears running down her face, while the rest of her stayed frozen in that punch, suspended between who she'd been and who she'd become, and who she might still be. She lowered her hand, wiped her face, turned off the light, and went back to bed. But she didn't sleep. By the time the sun came up, she'd made her decision. The Velvet Throne looked different in daylight. Mara had only ever seen it at night, when the dim lighting and careful staging made it look dangerous and expensive. In the morning, with sunlight streaming through the windows that hadn't been boarded up, it just looked tired. The mahogany paneling showed water damage in the corners. The leather on the booths was cracking. One of the chandeliers hung slightly crooked, and nobody had bothered to fix it. She found Vincent in the main room, sitting at the bar with a cup of coffee and a laptop, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that made him look almost normal. Almost. The way he held himself, spine straight, shoulders relaxed but ready, still broadcast danger to anyone paying attention. Marcus stood near the door because, of course he did. The man probably slept standing up like a horse. Vincent looked up when Mara's footsteps echoed across the empty floor. He didn't smile, but something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or satisfaction. "I was wondering if you'd show," he said. "I almost didn't." Mara stopped a few feet from the bar, hands in her jacket pockets. "I spent all night trying to talk myself out of it." "But you're here anyway." "I'm here anyway." Vincent closed the laptop and gestured to the stool next to him. "Sit. You want coffee? Danny's in the back, but I can grab you a cup." "I'm fine standing." "Suit yourself." He picked up his own cup, took a sip, set it down with deliberate care. "So, you've thought about my offer." "I have." "And?" Mara took a breath, held it, let it out slowly. "I'll do it. I'll fight in your tournament, but I need guarantees." "Such as?" "Protection. Real protection, not just words. If Sokolov's people come looking, I need to know you'll actually do something about it, not just hang me out to dry because I'm more trouble than I'm worth." Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. "You think I'd do that?" "I think you're a businessman, and businessmen make cost-benefit analyses. Right now, I'm potentially valuable to you. But if that changes, if protecting me becomes more expensive than it's worth, I need to know you won't just cut your losses." For a moment, Vincent didn't respond, just studied her face like he was reading a book written in a language he'd only recently learned. "You're right," he said finally. "I am a businessman. And you're right that I make decisions based on value and risk. But here's what you're missing. I don't abandon my people. Not when they're working for me, not when they're loyal, and especially not when they're useful. You agree to fight in this tournament, you become mine, and I protect what's mine. Until I'm not useful anymore. Until you give me a reason not to." Vincent leaned forward slightly. "Look, I'm not going to lie to you and say this is risk-free. Sokolov's a problem, and problems have a way of escalating. But I've been handling problems for 15 years and I'm still here, still standing, still running this city's underground like it's my personal kingdom. You think I got here by abandoning people when things got difficult?" Mara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his reputation, the stories she'd heard from other servers, the way people spoke his name with a mix of fear and respect, meant something, but trust was expensive, and she'd already spent too much of it on the wrong people. "3 conditions," she said. "First, I train my way. I don't care if you've got guys who think they know MMA. I prepare for fights alone, on my own schedule. Second, if I win the tournament, I get my prize money clean. No taxes skimmed off the top, no creative accounting, $500,000 paid in full. Third," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Third, if things go sideways with Sokolov, if he shows up or sends people, you don't just throw muscle at the problem. You end it, permanently." Vincent's eyebrows went up. "You're asking me to kill someone. I'm asking you to do what's necessary to make sure I don't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. However you interpret that is up to you." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Mara watched Vincent's face, trying to read whether she'd just crossed a line or earned his respect. With men like him, it was hard to tell the difference. Then he laughed. Not a big laugh, just a short bark of genuine amusement that transformed his features from intimidating to almost human. "I like you," he said, shaking his head. "I really do. Most people in your position would be begging for scraps, grateful for whatever crumbs I threw them. You're negotiating like you've got leverage." "I do have leverage. You need a fighter, and I'm good, better than good. You saw what I did to you last night, and that was me holding back because I was scared. Imagine what I can do when I'm not." "Fair point." Vincent drummed his fingers on the bar, thinking. Okay, deal. You train however you want, wherever you want. I'll set you up with access to a private gym, one of my properties, fully equipped, no idiots bothering you. Prize money gets paid in full if you win, no deductions. And if Sokolov becomes an active threat, I'll handle it in a way that ensures he stops being a problem. Satisfied? One more thing, I want it in writing. Vincent actually looked surprised. You want a contract for an illegal underground fighting tournament? I want something that says you'll do what you promised. Doesn't have to be legally binding. I know it won't be, but I want your signature on paper saying you'll protect me and pay me. Call it insurance. For a long moment, Vincent just stared at her. Then he reached into his back pocket, pulled out a pen, and grabbed a napkin from the bar's dispenser. He wrote quickly, his handwriting surprisingly neat. When he finished, he slid the napkin across to Mara. It read, Vincent Caruso agrees to provide protection and payment to Mara Kincaid in exchange for her participation in the November tournament. Protection includes active defense against Viktor Sokolov and associated threats. Payment is $500,000 upon victory, $10,000 upon participation, regardless of outcome. This agreement stands until Sokolov is neutralized or Mara requests termination of services. He'd signed it at the bottom, dated it, even added a phone number. That work for you? He asked. Mara picked up the napkin, read it twice, then folded it and put it in her pocket. Yeah, that works. Good, because we've got 3 weeks, and you're going to need every day of it. Vincent stood, finishing the last of his coffee. The tournament's not like what you're used to. No weight classes, no time limits, no referees stopping things when someone's hurt. Fights end when someone can't continue or doesn't want to. You'll face men twice your size who've been doing this their whole lives. Some of them have killed people. Most of them won't hesitate to hurt you badly if it means winning. I fought in worse. Maybe, but not recently. You've been hiding for 18 months, working a waitress job, probably not training seriously. Your cardio's going to be trash, your timing's going to be off, and your hands are soft from carrying drink trays instead of hitting bags. He wasn't being cruel, just factual. You've got 3 weeks to fix all of that and get your head right. Think you can do it? Mara met his eyes. Yeah, I can do it. Then let's get started. The gym Vincent took her to was in a different part of the city, tucked inside a warehouse that from the outside looked like it stored industrial equipment. Inside, it had been converted into a serious training facility, full-size octagon cage, heavy bags, speed bags, weight racks, grappling mats. Everything was clean and well-maintained, which told Mara this wasn't some abandoned space Vincent had repurposed. This was active, used. My guys train here sometimes, Vincent explained, unlocking the front door with another keycard. But I'll make sure they know to stay away during your hours. You want mornings, afternoons, nights? Whatever works for you. Mornings, Mara said immediately. Early. 5 to 9. Jesus, you're one of those people. Those people win fights. Vincent handed her the key card. It's yours. Code for the alarm is 4738. There's a shower in the back, water fountain by the cage. Anything breaks, call me. Anything gets stolen, call me. Anyone bothers you, let me guess. Call you. You're catching on quick. He walked toward the cage, running his hand along the chain-link fence. Tournament's 3 weeks from Saturday. 8 fighters total, single elimination bracket. You'll have 3 fights if you make it all the way. First round's usually the easiest. We seed it so the best fighters don't meet early, but even the easiest fight here is going to be harder than anything you faced in sanctioned competition. Who else is fighting? I'll get you the roster by tomorrow. Names won't mean anything to you. Most of these guys don't compete publicly, but I'll include whatever background information I have. Heights, weights, known specialties. It's not much, but it's better than going in blind. Mara walked to the center of the cage, feeling the spring in the canvas under her feet. It was tighter than she was used to, less give. That meant faster movement, but harder falls. She'd have to adjust her footwork. Can I ask you something? She said without turning around. Shoot. Why do you do this? The tournament, I mean. You've clearly got money, got power. What's the point of hosting illegal fights? Vincent was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its edge. You ever do something just because you can? Because it proves you're the person who gets to make the rules instead of following them? That's not an answer. Sure it is. It's just not a good one. He sighed. Truth is, I like the fight game. Always have. When I was younger, I thought I'd make a career out of it. Go pro. Make a name for myself. But I wasn't good enough. Not disciplined enough. Not hungry enough. So I went a different direction. Built a different kind of empire. But I never stopped loving the fights. The tournament lets me stay connected to that world. Lets me see what people are capable of when everything's on the line. And the money? The money's nice. Won't lie about that. But mostly it's about respect. Every year, people come from all over the country to compete in my tournament. They bring their best fighters, their biggest egos, their fattest wallets. And every year, I prove that nobody puts on a better show, runs a tighter operation, or delivers a bigger payday. That's worth more than money. Mara turned to face him. You're a control freak. Absolutely. But I'm a successful control freak, which is the best kind. Vincent checked his watch. I've got a meeting in an hour. You need anything else? Or are you good to start training on your own? I'm good. But Vincent... She waited until he looked at her. Thank you. For the chance, and for not asking more questions about my past. Don't thank me yet. You might end up hating me before this is over. He started toward the door, then paused. And for what it's worth, I did ask more questions. Had Tommy dig up everything he could find on you and Sokolov. But some questions are better left unanswered, and some answers are better kept private. What you told me last night was enough. He left before Mara could respond, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that felt like a turning point. For several minutes, she just stood in the cage, alone with the silence and the smell of sweat and disinfectant. Then she stripped off her jacket, tied her hair back, and started moving. The first hour was brutal. Vincent had been right about her conditioning. After 18 months of minimal exercise beyond walking to work and back, her cardiovascular system had turned to mush. 10 minutes of light shadowboxing left her breathing hard. 20 minutes left her gasping. By 30 minutes, she had to stop and bend over with her hands on her knees, sucking air like she was drowning. Her hands were wrong too, soft like Vincent had said. The skin across her knuckles, which had once been layered with calluses from thousands of hours hitting bags and pads, was smooth and tender. She threw a few test punches at the heavy bag and immediately regretted it. Pain flared across her right hand, sharp and mean. She hadn't wrapped her hands properly, hadn't conditioned them, hadn't done any of the preparation that turned fists into weapons instead of liabilities. By the time she left the gym 4 hours later, she could barely move. Her legs felt like concrete. Her shoulders burned. She'd thrown up twice, once from pushing too hard on the bag, once from attempting to drill takedowns on the grappling dummy, and discovering that her core strength had evaporated like morning dew. But she'd shown up. She'd started. That was something. The next 2 weeks became a blur of pain and repetition. Mara's days fell into a rhythm that was both familiar and alien. Wake up at 4:30. Eat something small, usually oatmeal and a banana, sometimes eggs if she could stomach them. Walk to the gym through Chicago's dark streets, where the only other people awake were closing bars or opening bakeries. Train until 9. Go home. Eat again. Sleep for a few hours. Wake up. Eat. Study the fighter roster Vincent had sent her. Sleep again. Repeat. The roster was terrifying. 8 fighters, including her. She recognized none of the names, but the stats told their own stories. Marcus Webb was listed first, which didn't surprise her. 6'3", 220, former Golden Gloves boxer with a record of 12 knockouts and 14 amateur fights before he'd been banned for excessive aggression. Whatever that meant in boxing, it probably meant broken bones. Next was a man named Dmitry Volkov. 6'4", 240, background in Russian Sambo and military hand-to-hand combat. The notes said he'd competed in underground circuits across Eastern Europe for 6 years and had never lost a fight that didn't involve weapons. Then Carlos Mendoza, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt who'd been banned from professional MMA after his 3rd positive drug test. 5'11", 190, known for submissions that damaged joints permanently. Jackson Reed, a former college wrestler turned bounty hunter. 6'2", 210, specialized in ground and pound techniques that had allegedly put 2 people in comas. Tyler Knox, an ex-Marine with a dishonorable discharge for reasons the notes didn't specify. 5'10", 185, training in Marine Corps martial arts program and Krav Maga. Chen Wei, a Sanda fighter from San Francisco's Chinatown, who supplemented his income by collecting debts for local gangs. 5'9", 170, fast and technical with more than 30 documented street fights. And finally, someone named Reaper. No real name given, which was either pretentious or smart, depending on whether you wanted to be found afterward. 6'1", 200, background unknown. Specialty listed as adaptive brutality. The notes included a warning. Dangerous, unpredictable, has killed at least twice in previous tournaments. Mara read that last line 3 times before closing the document. She was 5'6" and weighed 135 after a big meal. On paper, she was the smallest person in the tournament by 30 pounds minimum, 50 pounds on average. Every single one of them had size advantages. Most had reach advantages. Several had experience in exactly the kind of no-rules fighting this tournament represented. Her only advantages were speed, technique, and the element of surprise. Nobody expected much from the woman who'd been serving them drinks 3 weeks ago. It would have to be enough. By the end of the first week, Mara's body was remembering what it meant to be a weapon. Her hands had toughened up, new calluses forming over old scars. Her cardio improved. She could go 45 minutes now without stopping, sometimes longer if she paced herself. The techniques came back faster than she'd expected, muscle memory asserting itself over the 18 months of dormancy. But it wasn't just physical preparation. She had to get her head right too, fighting in sanctioned. A competitions had been one thing. Rules existed. Referees stopped things when they got too dangerous. Doctors checked you before and after. There were weight classes, drug testing, consequences for illegal strikes. It was violence, but it was regulated violence. The underground fights for Sokolov had been different, darker. No rules meant no limits, and no limits meant people got hurt in ways that couldn't be fixed. Mara still had nightmares about the Croatian woman, the way her head had bounced off the concrete floor, the sound it made, the vacant look in her eyes when she finally stopped moving. This tournament would be closer to Sokolov's fights than to anything sanctioned. Mara had to make peace with that. She spent her afternoons watching footage Vincent had sent her, recordings from previous tournaments, grainy cell phone videos of men beating each other unconscious while crowds cheered. The brutality was shocking even though she'd expected it. Broken bones, dislocated joints, knockouts that left people twitching on the canvas. One fight ended when someone's orbital bone shattered from a soccer kick to the face. Another, when a Kimura lock was held too long and the shoulder separated with an audible pop that the camera's microphone picked up. But what struck her most wasn't the violence, it was the skill. These weren't street brawlers or tough guys who'd watched too many action movies. They were legitimate fighters, many of them with professional training and serious technique. They just operated outside the system, either because they'd been banned from sanctioned competition or because the money was better in places where rules didn't apply. If Mara wanted to survive, let alone win, she needed to be better than all of them. On the 10th day, Vincent showed up at the gym. She was in the middle of drilling sprawls, defending takedown attempts from an imaginary opponent, when she heard the door open. Her body tensed automatically, ready for threat, before she recognized Vincent's silhouette against the morning light. "Don't stop on my account," he said, walking toward the cage. Mara finished the drill, 5 more sprawls, explosive and precise, before straightening up and wiping sweat from her face. "What are you doing here?" "Checking on my investment. Making sure you're actually training and not just using my gym to take naps." "Do I look like I've been napping?" Vincent's eyes swept over her, taking in the sweat-soaked clothes, the redness in her face, the way her chest heaved with exertion, and he shook his head. "No, you look like you're trying to die of exhaustion." "I'm trying to get ready for a fight against people who outweigh me by 50 pounds. "Fair enough." He leaned against the cage fence. "How's it going? Honestly?" Mara grabbed her water bottle and took a long drink before answering. "Honestly? I'm faster than I thought I'd be. My timing's coming back, but my power's gone. I'm landing clean shots on the heavy bag and they don't feel like they used to. Everything's lighter, weaker." "That's the weight loss. You've dropped what, 10 pounds since you started?" 12. Vincent frowned. "You can't afford to lose more. Not at your size." You need to eat more, build the weight back as muscle. I know what I need. I've done this before. Not in 18 months you haven't. And not while working a job that kept you on your feet 10 hours a day burning calories you weren't replacing. He pulled out his phone. I'm having food delivered to your apartment. Proper fighter nutrition, lean proteins, complex carbs, whatever else you need. Consider it part of the deal. I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's logistics. You fighting at 70% because you're underfed doesn't help either of us. Vincent's tone left no room for argument. The food shows up tomorrow morning. You eat it. That's not optional. Mara wanted to argue more, but exhaustion and pragmatism won out. Fine, thank you. Don't mention it. Vincent watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. You know, when I first saw you fight, I thought maybe you'd gotten lucky. Right place, right time, caught me off guard. But watching you now, seeing how you move even when you're tired, you're the real thing. You've got something most of these guys will never have. What's that? Control, discipline. You're not fighting because you're angry or because you like hurting people. You're fighting because it's a problem that needs solving, and you know how to solve problems. He pushed off from the fence. That's going to matter when things get ugly, and they will get ugly. I know. Do you? Because it's one thing to know it intellectually and another thing to experience it. When you're in that cage and someone's trying to cave your skull in, when you're hurt and tired and you can't remember why you thought this was a good idea, that's when discipline matters. That's when control is the only thing standing between you and a hospital bed. Mara set down her water bottle and walked closer to the fence, close enough to meet Vincent's eyes directly. I've been there before, in basements and warehouses where the only light came from work lamps and everyone watching wanted blood. I fought people who were trying to kill me, not just beat me, and I'm still here, still standing. So yeah, I know what ugly looks like, and I know how to survive it. Vincent studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I believe you do. Just make sure you remember that when the time comes. He left after that, and Mara went back to training. By the end of the second week, she'd put back on 8 pounds of muscle, and her power had started returning. Her combinations were sharp again, her footwork clean. She'd run through scenarios in her head for each potential opponent. How to handle Dmitry Volkov's size and Sambo background. How to avoid Marcus Webb's devastating punches. How to defend against Carlos Mendoza's submissions without getting trapped on the ground. She still didn't have a strategy for the one called Reaper. The footage Vincent had showed her was disturbing. The man fought like he had nothing to lose and everything to prove, mixing techniques from half a dozen disciplines with a creativity that was either genius or insane. Possibly both. 3 days before the tournament, Vincent called an emergency meeting. Mara arrived at the Velvet Throne to find the main room cleared except for Vincent, Marcus, Tommy Chen, and 2 people she didn't recognize, a woman in her 40s wearing an expensive suit and a younger man with the kind of pretty boy looks that belonged in modeling catalogs, not criminal enterprises. Mara, this is Angela Rossi and James Park, Vincent said without preamble. Angela handles legal for my operations. James handles public relations, such as they are. We've got a problem. Mara felt her stomach drop. Sokolov? Worse. Battaglia. Tommy pulled out his phone and showed Mara a text message. It was short and to the point. Heard Caruso's got a woman fighting in the tournament. Sounds interesting. I'll be attending with associates. Looking forward to the show. So? Mara said, not understanding why this was a problem. So Battaglia's an idiot with delusions of grandeur, Vincent explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. But he's also connected to people in New York who aren't idiots. If he shows up with associates, it means he's bringing muscle that doesn't answer to me. And if they're there to watch you specifically, it means someone talked. Someone told him about the woman who dropped Vincent Caruso in his own club. You think he's going to try something? I think he sees an opportunity to embarrass me. Maybe he bets against you, makes a show of it, spreads the story about how my featured fighter lost badly. Or maybe he tries something more direct, interferes with the fight, causes a scene, turns my tournament into a circus. Vincent's jaw was tight. Either way, it's a problem. Can you keep him out? Not without starting a war I don't want. He's got enough connections that banning him outright would be seen as weakness. I have to let him attend. but I don't have to make it easy for him. Angela Rossi spoke up for the first time, her voice crisp and professional. We're implementing additional security measures, metal detectors at all entrances, 3 times our normal number of guards, and I've arranged for off-duty police officers to be nearby in case things escalate beyond our control. Cops? Mara couldn't keep the skepticism out of her voice. At an illegal fighting tournament? Cops who know better than to ask questions as long as everything stays contained, Angela corrected. Chicago's a city of compromises, Miss Kincaid. Vincent's compromises just run deeper than most. James Park leaned forward, his pretty boy face serious. The bigger issue is perception. If Battaglia makes a scene, if your fight becomes a story that spreads, it puts a spotlight on operations that thrive in shadows. We need to make sure that doesn't happen, which means you need to win, decisively. No controversy, no drama, just a clean victory that makes Battaglia look stupid for doubting you. No pressure, Mara muttered. Vincent's expression softened slightly. Look, I know this complicates things, but the fundamentals haven't changed. You fight your fights, you do what you're trained to do, and I'll handle everything else. Battaglia's my problem, not yours. Except he's coming specifically to see me lose. That makes it my problem too. Then prove him wrong. Vincent stood, signaling the meeting was over. Tournament's in 3 days, final medical check tomorrow afternoon. Angelo will meet you at the gym at 2. After that, you rest. No training, no stress, just sleep and food and mental preparation. Understood? Mara nodded. As she turned to leave, Vincent called after her. Mara, one more thing. Win or lose, you've already earned your place here. Don't forget that. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she just left. The final 3 days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Mara did as instructed. Rested, ate, tried not to think about the 8 dangerous men she might have to fight, or the crime boss who wanted to see her fail, or the bounty hunter from her past who might show up at any moment. Instead, she thought about control, about discipline, about the difference between fighting because you had to and fighting because you chose to. And when Saturday arrived, when she woke up in her shabby apartment with sunlight streaming through the cracked window, she was ready. Time to find out if Vincent Caruso's faith in her was justified. Time to stop running and start swinging back. The venue wasn't the Velvet Throne. Mara had assumed it would be, that Vincent would host his tournament in the same place he conducted most of his business. But when Marcus picked her up that Saturday evening in a black SUV with windows tinted dark enough to be illegal, they drove in the opposite direction, away from the south side and toward the industrial wasteland near the old stockyards. Where are we going? Mara asked from the back seat. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Someplace big enough to hold 300 people and private enough that nobody asked questions. 300 people. Mara's stomach tightened. She'd fought in front of crowds before. Her largest sanctioned fight had drawn maybe 2,000 spectators. But this felt different. Those crowds had been audiences. These people were gamblers, criminals, voyeurs looking for violence they couldn't get legally. They'd paid serious money to watch people hurt each other, and they'd expect a show worth the price. The SUV turned onto a street that looked like the city had forgotten it existed. Warehouses lined both sides, most of them dark and abandoned. Graffiti covered every available surface. A chain-link fence ran along the left side of the road, protecting nothing from nobody. Marcus pulled up to a building that looked marginally less decrepit than its neighbors. A 3-story brick structure with a loading dock and a few flickering lights visible through grimy windows. 2 men stood outside the entrance, both built like refrigerators, both wearing earpieces and expressions that discouraged conversation. This is it, Marcus said, killing the engine. You ready? Mara's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists, forcing them steady. As ready as I'll ever be. Inside the building had been transformed. The ground floor had been completely gutted, walls removed, floor reinforced, all the industrial equipment cleared out to create a massive open space. In the center sat an octagon cage, bigger than the one in Vincent's gym, illuminated by industrial lights hanging from the exposed ceiling. Around the cage, stadium-style seating had been erected in tiers, already half full with people drinking, smoking, shouting to each other over music that pounded from speakers Mara couldn't see. The air smelled like sweat and beer and something else. Anticipation, maybe, or blood that hadn't been spilled yet but would be soon. Vincent found her within 30 seconds of her arrival. He was wearing all black, black suit, black shirt, no tie, and he moved through the crowd like a shark through water, people partying automatically to let him pass. "You made it," he said, though it wasn't really a question. His eyes swept over her, assessing. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified." "Good. Terrified means you're paying attention." He gestured toward a door on the far side of the warehouse. "Fighter prep areas through there. You'll have a locker, a corner team if you want one, medical standing by. First fight's in 45 minutes. You're matched against Chen Wei, the Sanda fighter from San Francisco. 5'9", 170, fast and technical. Not the worst possible first-round matchup, but not easy either. Mara had watched footage of him. He favored leg kicks and sweeps, liked to control distance, had granite hands from years of conditioning. "Any last-minute advice?" she asked. Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke his voice was lower, meant only for her. "Yeah. Don't try to prove anything. You're not here to show off or make a statement. You're here to survive and advance. If that means fighting ugly, if that means running for 5 minutes until you see an opening, do it. Pride gets people hurt. Smart gets people paid." "Noted." "And Mara?" He waited until she met his eyes. "Batalia's here. Third row, east side, surrounded by 6 guys who definitely aren't from Chicago. I've got people watching them, but stay aware. If something feels wrong, if the fight starts going sideways in ways that don't make sense, you get out. I don't care if you have to forfeit. Your safety matters more than the tournament." The fact that Vincent was worried enough to say that out loud made Mara's fear spike higher. "You think he'll try something during the fight?" "I think he's stupid enough to consider it and connected enough to maybe pull it off. So yeah, stay sharp." He left her at the door to the prep area, where a woman with a clipboard checked her name off a list and pointed her toward locker number 4. The room was smaller than Mara had expected, essentially a converted office space with metal lockers lining the walls and benches in the center. 2 other fighters were already there, one shadowboxing in the corner, the other sitting with his eyes closed and headphones on, lips moving in what might have been prayer or a pep talk. Mara found her locker and started the familiar ritual of preparation. Wrapping her hands first, the white cloth wound tight around knuckles and wrists, layer after layer until her fists felt like rocks. Then stretching, hips, shoulders, neck, everything that needed to stay loose when adrenaline tried to turn her muscles to stone. Finally, just sitting and breathing, eyes closed, visualizing the fight. Chen Wei would come out fast. He'd try to establish his range with leg kicks, chopping at her lead leg to slow her movement. If she let him control the pace, she'd spend 15 minutes getting picked apart from distance. She needed to pressure him, get inside his reach, make it a close quarters fight where his height and length advantages disappeared. But not recklessly. Smart pressure, calculated aggression. A knock on the locker room door interrupted her visualization. "Chen and Kincaid, you're up in 5, someone called. 5 minutes. Mara stood, rolled her shoulders, shook out her legs. The other fighters glanced at her, the first time they'd really acknowledged her presence, and she saw the calculation in their eyes, trying to figure out what kind of threat she posed, whether she was serious or just some novelty act Vincent was running for publicity. They'd find out soon enough. The walk from the locker room to the cage felt both eternal and instantaneous. The crowd's volume increased as Mara emerged, people turning to look, conversations pausing mid-sentence. She heard whispers, laughter, someone shouting odds that weren't in her favor. The cage looked bigger from outside than it had from across the room. 8 walls of chain-link fencing forming an octagon, maybe 30 feet across, canvas floor showing stains that were probably blood from previous tournaments. Chen Wei was already inside, bouncing on his toes in the far corner. He was exactly as advertised, compact, muscular, with the coiled energy of someone who knew how to explode into violence. His corner team consisted of 2 men, one holding a water bottle, the other speaking rapidly in Cantonese while Chen nodded. Mara's corner was empty except for Marcus, who'd apparently volunteered or been assigned. He held the cage door open for her, his massive frame blocking her view of the crowd. "You got this," he said quietly. "Stay smart, stay moving, and remember he's never fought anyone like you before. Use that." Then she was inside the cage, and Marcus was closing the door behind her with a metallic clang that sounded terrifyingly final. The referee was an older man with scarred knuckles and a nose that had been broken more times than Mara could count. He called both fighters to the center, his voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "You know the rules," he said, which was funny because there weren't any rules. Fight ends when someone can't continue or verbally submits. No weapons, no biting, no eye gouging. Anything else goes. Touch gloves if you want, then back to your corners until I signal the start. Chen Wei didn't offer his gloves, just stared at Mara with flat professional eyes that measured and dismissed her in the same glance. Then he turned and walked back to his corner. Fine. Mara did the same. The 45 seconds between returning to her corner and the fight starting were the longest of her life. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands felt simultaneously too light and too heavy. The crowd noise became a physical thing, pressing against her skull, and she could see Battaglia now, third row east side, exactly where Vincent had said, surrounded by men in expensive suits who watched the cage with the intensity of people who had money riding on the outcome. The referee raised his hand, dropped it. The fight began. Chen Wei came out exactly as Mara had predicted, establishing distance immediately, circling to his right, throwing a probing leg kick that snapped against Mara's lead thigh hard enough to sting. She absorbed it, reset her stance, kept her hands high. He threw another kick, this one to her calf, and the impact sent a jolt of pain up her leg. Okay. He was going to chop her down if she gave him space. Time to take that option away. Mara pressed forward, closing the distance faster than Chen expected. He threw a straight right to keep her back, but she slipped it and stepped inside his range. Suddenly they were chest to chest, too close for his kicks to generate power, and Mara threw a short uppercut to his body that landed clean. Chen's eyes widened. Surprise or pain, maybe both, and he immediately tried to create space, pushing off and circling away. But Mara stayed on him, cutting angles to prevent his retreat, throwing quick combinations that kept him defensive. She wasn't landing everything. Chen's hands were fast, his block solid, but she was controlling the pace, dictating the engagement. For the first 2 minutes, it was her fight. Then Chen adapted. Instead of circling away when Mara pressured, he suddenly shot forward into a clinch, wrapping both arms around her torso and driving her backward toward the cage fence. Mara's back hit the chain link with enough force to rattle her teeth, and then Chen was working, kneeing her thighs, her hips, grinding his shoulder into her chin to control her head position. This was Sanda clinch work, refined over years of training, and Mara was in trouble. She tried to create space by pushing against his shoulders, but he was stronger and had better position. Another knee landed, this one to her ribs, and she felt something shift that might have been cartilage. The crowd was roaring now, sensing blood. Mara stopped trying to push Chen away and instead pulled him closer, eliminating the space he needed for knees. He tried to adjust, to create separation, and in that half second of transition, Mara drove her foot down onto his instep with all her weight. Chen's grip loosened, just for a moment, just from the pain, and Mara exploded out of the clinch with a shoulder throw that used his own momentum against him. They hit the canvas together, Mara on top, and for 3 seconds she had the dominant position. She could have started throwing punches, could have gone for a submission, could have done a dozen different things. But Chen was a jiu-jitsu practitioner too, and 3 seconds was all he needed to recover. His legs came up, wrapping around Mara's waist in a guard that immediately threatened submissions. She felt him reaching for her left arm, trying to isolate it for a kimura, and she yanked it back just in time. They scrambled on the ground for what felt like hours but was probably 30 seconds, Chen hunting for submissions, Mara defending and trying to improve position without getting caught. Neither could establish full control. It was chess played at high speed with bodies instead of pieces, both fighters too skilled to make the kind of mistake that would end things quickly. Finally, Mara managed to stand, breaking the grapple and returning the fight to standing range. Chen popped up immediately, barely winded, and they reset in the center of the cage. Mara's ribs hurt where his knees had landed. Her left thigh was already starting to swell from the leg kicks. She'd been in the cage maybe 4 minutes, and her body was cataloging damage. But Chen wasn't unmarked either. His instep was bothering him. She could see it in the way he favored his left leg, the slight hitch when he put weight on it. And her uppercut to his body had landed harder than she'd thought. He was breathing slightly heavier, his guard a fraction lower on his right side. They circled each other, both wary, both looking for openings. Chen threw a head kick that Mara barely ducked. She countered with a straight left that caught him on the jaw, not flush, but enough to snap his head back. He reset, threw another leg kick, and this time Mara caught it. For a moment they were frozen. Chen balanced on one leg, Mara holding his ankle, both calculating their next move. Then Mara twisted and swept Chen's standing leg. He went down hard, landing on his back, and Mara dropped into his guard before he could scramble up. But instead of trying to pass or throw punches, she did something Chen wasn't expecting. She stood up while still controlling his legs, stepped to the side, and drove an elbow down toward his exposed ribs. Chen blocked with his forearm, but the impact still hurt. He tried to sit up, to defend, and that's when Mara saw the opening she'd been waiting for. His right arm extended slightly too far, his balance compromised. She dove forward, trapping his arm against her chest and rolling backward in a smooth armbar setup. Chen recognized the danger immediately and tried to stack her, driving his weight forward to prevent the extension. They struggled for position, both understanding that if Mara got the armbar locked, the fight was over. But Chen was strong, and his jiu-jitsu was good enough to defend. He managed to pull his elbow back just enough to prevent full extension, then twisted his body and escaped, both fighters scrambling back to their feet. The referee hadn't called time. There were no rounds in this tournament. Fights continued until someone couldn't, but both fighters had silently agreed to a momentary reset. They stood maybe 6 feet apart, breathing hard, sweat dripping onto the canvas. Mara's everything hurt, but Chen looked worse. His breathing was labored now, his movements a half step slower. The pace had taken its toll. Time to end this. Mara came forward again, pressuring with combinations that were more volume than power. Jab, cross, hook, low kick. Chen defended most of it, but defending was exhausting, and his counters were coming slower. She threw a head kick that he blocked, then immediately shot for a takedown while his hands were high. This time the takedown was clean. Chen went down with Mara on top in side control, his defensive guard compromised. She transitioned to mount before he could recover, her knees pinning his shoulders, her weight distributed to prevent bucking. Chen tried to roll, but Mara posted her hands and stayed balanced. He tried to create space with his hips, but she was too tight, too controlled. And when he made the mistake of turning to his side to defend against punches, Mara slid her arm under his chin. The rear naked choke locked in like a vice. Chen's hands immediately went to Mara's arm, trying to create space, trying to prevent the choke from fully sinking. But her technique was perfect. One arm across his throat, the other behind his head, her legs hooking his to control his body. She squeezed, not violently, just with steady, inexorable pressure. Chen fought it for maybe 10 seconds. His face turned red, then purple. His struggles became more desperate, more frantic. The crowd was screaming, but Mara couldn't hear them anymore. There was only the choke, only the control, only the wait for Chen to make the smart decision. He tapped. 3 sharp slaps against her forearm, the universal signal of submission. Mara released immediately, rolling off him and standing on shaky legs. Chen stayed on the ground for a moment, gasping, one hand on his throat. Then he stood too, nodded once at Mara with something that might have been respect, and walked to his corner without ceremony. The referee raised Mara's hand, declaring her the winner. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some cheering, some booing, probably depending on who'd bet what. But Mara barely registered it. Her entire focus was on breathing, on staying vertical, on not showing how much that fight had taken out of her. Marcus was there immediately, guiding her out of the cage with a hand on her shoulder. "Good work. Clean finish. How bad are you hurt?" "Ribs are bruised, maybe cracked. Left leg's going to swell. Nothing that won't heal. Medical's going to check you anyway. Vincent's orders." The medical check happened in a curtained-off corner of the prep area. A doctor who asked questions in a bored voice while probing her ribs and checking her eyes for signs of concussion. He declared her fit to continue, wrapped her ribs with an elastic bandage that helped with the pain, and sent her back to her locker with instructions to ice her leg. Mara had maybe an hour before the next fight, maybe less, depending on how quickly the other matches resolved. She sat on the bench, ice pack on her thigh, and tried not to think about the fact that she'd just won 1 fight and had 2 more to go. Chen Wei had been the smallest, most technical opponent in the tournament. Everyone else was bigger. Most were meaner. The prep room door opened and Vincent walked in. He looked pleased, which was surprising given his usual neutral expression. "That was good," he said without preamble. "Better than good. You made Chen look slow. People are talking." "What are they saying?" "That I've been hiding a ringer, that the odds on you were criminally generous. that anyone who bet against you in the first round is an idiot. Vincent sat down next to her. Batalia's pissed. He had money on Chen, not a lot, but enough that losing stings. Good. Vincent smiled. Your next fight's against Tyler Knox. Ex-Marine, Krav Maga background. He just finished his first-round match, won by TKO in under 3 minutes. He's aggressive, reckless, and he hits like a truck. Also, his ground game is weak. If you can get him down, you'll have options. How long until we fight? 45 minutes, give or take. Other semifinal is Dmitry Volkov versus Marcus. That made Mara's head snap up. Marcus is fighting? I thought he worked for you. He does, but he also loves fighting, and he's good at it. Wins the tournament maybe 1 year in 3. If he wins tonight, you'll face him in the finals. The idea of fighting Marcus, 6'3", 220, a man she'd seen punch holes in heavy bags, was terrifying. But that was a problem for later. Right now, she needed to focus on Tyler Knox. Vincent stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. Knox fought dirty in his first match. Tried to thumb his opponent's eyes when the ref wasn't looking. Didn't work, but he tried. So don't expect honor or restraint. He'll do whatever he thinks he can get away with. Noted. And Mara. Vincent's expression turned serious. You're doing better than I expected. Better than you probably expected. Don't let success make you careless. The next fight will be harder. He was right. 43 minutes later, Mara was back in the cage facing Tyler Knox, and within the first 10 seconds, she knew this was going to be brutal. Knox came out like a man possessed. No feeling out process, no measuring distance, just immediate, overwhelming aggression. He threw a head kick that would have decapitated Mara if it had landed, followed it with a flying knee that she barely avoided, then started throwing punches in combinations that had no rhythm or pattern, just violence seeking targets. Mara backpedaled, covering up, absorbing shots on her arms and shoulders because blocking was the only defense when someone attacked like a hurricane. Knox was faster than his record suggested, and his punches carried serious power. One caught her on the temple, and her vision sparked white for a half second. The crowd was going insane. This was the kind of fight they'd paid to see. Brutal, chaotic, someone possibly getting knocked unconscious. Knox pressed forward, throwing a spinning back fist that was more flash than technique. Mara ducked under it and finally found space to counter. A low kick to his lead leg that landed with a meaty thwack. Knox didn't even slow down. He threw a haymaker right hand that Mara slipped, then grabbed for her in a sloppy clinch attempt. This wasn't Sanda technique. This was street fighting, bar brawling, just trying to grab and hurt. Mara twisted away, but Knox's fingers caught in her hair and yanked hard. Pain flared across her scalp as he pulled her off balance. The referee should have stopped that. Hair pulling was one of the few things explicitly banned, but the referee was either not paying attention or didn't care, and Knox used the grip to throw a knee toward Mara's face. She got her hands up just in time, blocking the knee but taking the impact on her forearms hard enough to send shocks up to her elbows. Then she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She grabbed Knox's knee while it was still extended and drove forward, taking him down with a single leg that was more desperation than technique. They hit the canvas hard, Mara on top, but without good position. Knox immediately tried to roll, but Mara had been right about his ground game. It was sloppy, instinctive rather than trained. She transitioned to his back, her hook sinking in, one arm snaking toward his neck. Knox recognized the danger and did the only thing he could think of. He reached back and grabbed Mara's hair again, yanking her head to the side while driving his head backward into her face. The headbutt caught Mara on the cheekbone and her vision went blurry. She felt something warm running down her face, blood from a cut somewhere above her eye. Her grip on Knox loosened, and he used that moment to explode out from under her, both fighters scrambling to their feet. Mara's face was a mess. Blood ran from the cut above her eye into her vision, turning everything red on the left side. Her cheekbone throbbed. The ribs that had been bruised in the first fight were screaming now. But Knox was breathing like a freight train, his face flushed dark red from exertion. The early aggression had burned through his gas tank faster than his corner had probably planned. He was still dangerous, maybe more dangerous now, actually, fighting on fumes and adrenaline with nothing left to lose. They circled each other, both hurt, both looking for the moment that would end it. Knox charged again, throwing punches with bad technique but genuine bad intentions. Mara slipped left, right, ducked under a hook, and saw her opening. Knox's right hand had dropped after the missed hook, his chin exposed for just a moment. She threw the cleanest right cross of her life. The punch traveled maybe 8 inches and landed with every ounce of power Mara could generate through her legs, hips, and shoulder. It caught Knox flush on the jaw, and his head snapped sideways with a crack that was audible even over the crowd noise. Knox's eyes rolled back. His legs went out from under him. He dropped face first onto the canvas like someone had cut his strings. The referee was there immediately, waving off the fight before Knox could even try to get up. Not that he was getting up, he was conscious but dazed, his corner team already rushing into the cage to check on him. Mara stood over him, blood still running down her face, her right hand hanging at her side because every knuckle felt broken, and watched the referee declare her the winner. 2 fights down, 1 to go. Marcus was waiting when she stumbled out of the cage. Medical, now! The cut above her eye needed 6 stitches, which the doctor administered with the kind of efficiency that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times before. The right hand wasn't broken, just badly bruised across the knuckles where she'd connected with Knox's jawbone. They gave her ice, painkillers that she refused because she needed to stay sharp, and a fresh elastic wrap for her ribs. You shouldn't fight again tonight, the doctor said flatly. You've taken significant damage. Continuing would be medically inadvisable. How long until the finals? Mara asked Marcus, ignoring the doctor entirely. Volkov and I are fighting now. Figure 20 minutes, maybe 30. Then you've got at least an hour break before the final. I can do 90 minutes. Marcus started. I can do 90 minutes, she repeated, harder this time. Just tell me who I'm fighting. Marcus exchanged a look with the doctor, then sighed. Vincent's going to love this. Fine. You'll know who won when you hear the crowd. They go crazy for Volkov's knockouts, and they go crazy when I win. Either way, you'll know. He left to prepare for his own fight, and Mara was alone again with her thoughts and her pain. 23 minutes later, the crowd's reaction told her everything she needed to know. No roar of approval, no sustained cheering. Just a sudden crescendo followed by confused murmuring that suggested something unexpected had happened. A few minutes after that, Vincent appeared in the prep area looking genuinely surprised. Marcus lost, he said without preamble. Volkov caught him with a liver shot in the first 5 minutes. Marcus couldn't continue. Mara felt her stomach drop. She'd been preparing mentally to fight Marcus, big, powerful, technically sound, but beatable with the right strategy. Dmitry Volkov was a completely different animal. 6'4", 240, Russian Sambo, and military combatives. The man who'd never lost a fight that didn't involve weapons. How bad is Marcus? She asked, because she genuinely liked the big man despite knowing him for less than a month. He'll live. Pride's hurt worse than his body. But Mara, listen to me. Vincent's voice dropped. You don't have to do this. Volkov's a killer, not metaphorically. He's actually killed people in fights before. You've already proven yourself. Already earned respect. Second place still pays $75,000. That's life-changing money. You can walk away right now and nobody would blame you. Mara looked at Vincent's face, at the genuine concern written there, and realized he was offering her an out because he cared whether she survived the night. What are my odds? She asked. Vincent grimaced. Honestly, maybe 20%. And that's being generous. Volkov outweighs you by over 100 pounds. He's fought professionally in Russia. He's never been submitted, rarely been taken down. And he's mean. He doesn't just want to win, he wants to hurt people. But there's a chance. There's always a chance. But chances and probabilities aren't the same thing, and the probability is you get badly hurt. Mara thought about the napkin contract folded in her apartment, about 18 months of running, about Viktor Sokolov's bounty, and the life she'd left behind. She thought about the woman who'd dropped Vincent Caruso on his ass 3 weeks ago, and the woman who'd just beaten 2 dangerous men in the same night despite being smaller, lighter, and less experienced in this kind of fighting. I didn't come this far to quit before the end, she said. I'm fighting Volkov. Vincent studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, then we prepare. And we prepare smart, because brute force won't work. You need a strategy that accounts for the size difference and exploits his weaknesses. What weaknesses? He's arrogant. Thinks he's invincible because he's bigger and stronger than everyone he's faced. He'll underestimate you. Everyone does. Use that. Make him chase you, tire him out, then attack when he's not expecting it. That's not much of a strategy. It's the only strategy you've got. Well, that and pray he makes a mistake big enough for you to capitalize on. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed her footage from Volkov's earlier fight. The man was exactly as advertised, enormous, powerful, technical, in a brutal Eastern European way that favored bone-breaking efficiency over flash. He destroyed his first-round opponent in under 4 minutes, using sweeps and throws to put the man on the ground, then raining down punches until the referee stopped it. Mara watched the footage 3 times, looking for tells, for patterns, for anything she could use. Volkov was patient when he was winning, aggressive when he sensed weakness. He favored his right hand for power shots but set them up with his left. His stance was wide, stable, hard to sweep. His takedown defense looked solid. He drops his right hand after he throws the jab, Mara said, pointing at the screen. Just for a second, but it's there. And when he pressures forward, his chin comes up slightly. Those are the only openings I see. Those are small openings for small opportunities, Vincent said. You'd need perfect timing and perfect execution. Then I'll be perfect. Vincent's laugh was short and sharp. You're either crazy or the most confident person I've ever met. I can't decide which. Maybe both. Yeah, maybe both. He stood, offering his hand to help her up from the bench. You've got about 40 minutes before they call you. Rest, hydrate, and try not to think about how insane this is. I'll be in your corner for this one. Marcus, too, if his liver stops hurting long enough for him to stand upright. Vincent? Mara caught his arm before he could leave. If I lose, if this goes badly, make sure my prize money for getting this far goes to my landlord. The apartment's paid through next month, but I owe him for some damages I never fixed. Vincent's expression darkened. You're not going to die, Mara. I know, but in case I do, I want my debts settled. You won't. Because I've invested too much time and money into keeping you alive to let some Russian psychopath ruin my return on investment. He squeezed her shoulder, gentle, despite his hands being roughly the size of dinner plates. You've surprised everyone so far. Surprise them one more time. Then he was gone, and Mara was alone with her fear and her determination and the knowledge that in less than an hour she'd be facing the most dangerous man in the building. The wait was agony. Every minute felt like an hour. The painkillers she'd refused earlier would have been useful now. Her ribs were a constant ache. The cut above her eye throbbed despite the stitches. Her right hand felt like it had been hit with a hammer. But she needed to be sharp, needed every advantage she could manufacture. At the 30-minute mark, the door opened and Battaglia walked in. Mara was on her feet immediately, hands coming up into a defensive posture on pure instinct. But Battaglia wasn't attacking. He was just standing there in his expensive suit, flanked by 2 of the men who'd been sitting with him in the crowd, smiling like a shark who'd just spotted blood in the water. Congratulations on making it to the finals, he said, his voice smooth and urbane in a way that made Mara's skin crawl. I'll admit, I didn't think you'd get past the first round. Color me impressed. You're not supposed to be back here, Mara said, not relaxing her stance. Oh, Vincent's rules. How quaint. Battaglia took a step closer. I just wanted to offer some friendly advice before your next fight. See, I've known Dmitry Volkov for years, worked with him on a few projects in the past, and I can tell you from personal experience, he doesn't like women, doesn't respect them, doesn't spare them, doesn't show them any mercy in or out of the ring. So when you step into that cage, understand that he's not just going to beat you, he's going to break you, slowly, painfully, for the entertainment of everyone watching. Is there a point to this, or are you just here to hear yourself talk? Battaglia's smile widened. The point is that I'm offering you a way out. Forfeit the fight right now, walk away with your second-place money, and I'll make sure Volkov knows to leave you alone afterward. But if you fight him, if you insist on continuing this charade, well, I can't promise your safety. Accidents happen in the ring, people get hurt. Sometimes they don't recover. Behind him, one of his men cracked his knuckles deliberately. The message was clear. This wasn't just about the fight. This was a threat. Get out, Mara said quietly. I'm sorry? Get out. Before I make you. Battaglia actually laughed at that. You think you can... The door slammed open, and Marcus filled the frame, looking murderous despite obviously still being in pain from his liver shot. "Battaglia,
The fuck are you doing in the fighter prep area?" "Just offering some friendly advice to get out, now, before Vincent finds out you're back here making threats and decides your connections aren't worth the headache of keeping you breathing." For a moment, Mara thought Battaglia might actually push it, might test whether Marcus was bluffing. But whatever he saw in Marcus's face convinced him otherwise. He straightened his suit jacket, nodded to his men, and walked out without another word. Marcus waited until the door closed before turning to Mara.
"You okay?" "Yeah, he's just trying to get in my head." "Well, don't let him. Vincent's got eyes on Battaglia and his crew. If they try anything during the fight, we'll handle it." Marcus winced and pressed a hand to his side. That being said, Battaglia wasn't totally wrong. Volkov's a bad man, worse than most, and he doesn't pull punches, literally or figuratively. "I know."
"Do you?"
Because knowing intellectually and experiencing personally are different things. I've fought him before. He lost, obviously. And I'm a lot bigger and stronger than you. So if you're having second thoughts, now's the time to voice them. Mara met his eyes. "I'm not quitting, Marcus. I've run from too many things already. I'm not running from this." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, then let's make sure you've got the best chance possible. Come on, let's go over strategy one more time before they call you." They spent the next 15 minutes planning, theorizing, looking for any angle that might give Mara an edge. The conclusion they reached wasn't encouraging. Volkov had every physical advantage, superior experience, and a reputation that bordered on mythological. Mara's only real chance was to survive the early onslaught, wait for an opening, and execute perfectly when that opening appeared. It was a plan that relied heavily on luck and hope. But it was all they had. When the call came, Volkov and Kincaid, 5 minutes, Mara stood on legs that felt steadier than they had any right to feel. The fear was still there, would probably always be there. But underneath it was something else, something harder and colder and more dangerous. She'd survived Sokolov's underground fights. She'd survived 18 months of running. She'd survived 2 brutal fights tonight already. She could survive one more. Marcus walked her to the cage entrance, Vincent appearing from somewhere in the crowd to join them. The warehouse was packed now, every seat filled, people standing in the aisles, the noise level approaching painful. Money was changing hands everywhere she looked, last-minute bets being placed before the main event. "Remember," Vincent said, his voice barely audible over the crowd. "Survive first, win second. And if you get in trouble, real trouble, you cover up and we throw in the towel. Pride's not worth brain damage." Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. The cage door opened. The crowd's noise doubled, and Dmitry Volkov stood in the opposite corner, massive and scarred and smiling like he'd just been told Christmas came early. Mara stepped into the cage. The door closed behind her. Dmitry Volkov didn't move when the referee signaled the start. He just stood there, hands loose at his sides, watching Mara with the kind of predatory stillness that made every survival instinct in her body scream to run. He was even bigger up close than he'd looked in the footage. Not bodybuilder big. There was nothing artificial or aesthetic about his build. Just raw, functional mass distributed across a frame that looked like it had been carved from granite by someone with a grudge. His face was a roadmap of old violence. Crooked nose, scar tissue around both eyes, a jagged line running from his left ear to his jaw that looked like it had come from a knife. His head was shaved clean, and in the harsh overhead lighting, Mara could see smaller scars crisscrossing his scalp. This was a man who'd spent his entire life hurting people and being hurt in return. "You are small," he said in heavily accented English, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "This will be quick." Mara didn't respond, just kept her guard high and started circling, trying to establish some kind of rhythm, some sense of control over the engagement. Volkov turned to track her movement but didn't pursue. Just watched with those dead, flat eyes that suggested he'd already decided how this was going to end. The crowd was chanting something in Russian, probably his name, probably encouragement. Somewhere in that sea of faces, Battaglia was watching, waiting for her to fail. Vincent and Marcus were in her corner, close enough to shout advice, but too far away to help if things went catastrophically wrong. Mara was alone in the cage with a man who outweighed her by 105 pounds and had never lost a fight. She threw a leg kick to test his reaction time. Volkov checked it casually, barely shifting his stance, and Mara's shin might as well have hit a steel beam for all the effect it had. He didn't counter, didn't even seem bothered, just went back to watching. Okay, leg kicks weren't going to work. The man's shins were probably calcified from years of conditioning. Mara tried a different approach, feinting a jab to draw a reaction, then circling out before he could respond. Volkov's eyes tracked her movement, but his body stayed planted. He was letting her move, letting her tire herself out, conserving his energy like a boa constrictor that knew its prey couldn't run forever. "You are scared," Volkov observed, not mocking, just stating a fact. "This is smart. Fear keeps you alive. For now." Then he moved. It wasn't a lunge or a charge or any of the aggressive openings Mara had been expecting. It was just a step forward, perfectly balanced, and suddenly the distance between them had shrunk by 3 feet. Mara backpedaled on instinct, but Volkov was already throwing, a jab that looked lazy and slow until it wasn't, until it was slicing through the air toward her face with shocking speed. She slipped it by millimeters, felt the wind of its passage, and tried to counter with a right cross. Volkov leaned back just enough to make her miss, then threw a left hook that caught Mara on the shoulder as she tried to retreat. The impact spun her halfway around and sent pain radiating down her entire left side. That was a glancing blow. A shot he'd thrown almost casually, and it had nearly buckled her legs. The crowd's noise intensified. They could smell blood. Mara reset her stance, shaking out her left arm to make sure everything still worked. Volkov was back to his waiting posture, hands loose, expression unchanged. Like he'd just swatted a fly and was mildly curious whether it would get back up. She needed a different strategy. Couldn't trade punches with him. He'd break her. Couldn't kick at range. He was too well conditioned. Couldn't wait him out. The longer this went, the more her accumulated damage from the previous fights would slow her down. Which left one option: get close, get dirty, and make this a fight instead of a beatdown. Mara pressed forward, committing to the pocket, throwing combinations that were more about creating chaos than landing clean shots. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut, volume over precision. Volkov blocked most of it, his defense surprisingly technical for someone so huge. But Mara wasn't trying to hurt him with the punches. She was trying to crowd his space, to prevent him from generating power, to turn this into a close-quarters brawl where size mattered less. For maybe 15 seconds, it worked. They were chest to chest, exchanging short punches and elbows, both fighting for dominant position. Mara even landed a clean elbow to Volkov's jaw that snapped his head sideways. He didn't even blink. Then his hands clamped onto her shoulders like industrial vices, and he threw her. Mara had been thrown before, spent years drilling takedowns and throw defenses. But this was different. Volkov didn't use technique or leverage or any of the principles she'd learned. He just picked her up like she weighed nothing and launched her backward across the cage. She hit the chain-link fence hard enough to leave an imprint, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Her vision grayed at the edges. By the time she recovered enough to move, Volkov was already there, driving a knee into her midsection that would have ruptured something vital if she hadn't twisted just enough to take it on her hip instead. Pain exploded through her pelvis and down her leg. Mara's knees buckled and she started to drop, but Volkov caught her by the throat with one massive hand and slammed her back against the fence again. "Stay up," he said, almost conversational. "It's no fun if you fall too quick." He threw a right hand aimed at her face. Mara got her left arm up to block and felt something in her forearm crack. Not break, but definitely damage. The force of the blocked punch still rattled her skull. Volkov threw another punch, this one to her body, and Mara's ribs, already bruised and wrapped from the previous fights, screamed in protest. She was in serious trouble, pinned against the fence with a man twice her size teeing off on her, and the referee wasn't stopping anything because technically she was still defending herself, still conscious, still in the fight. Through the pain and the panic, Mara heard Marcus shouting from the corner, "Move, Mara, move, goddammit!" She couldn't move. Volkov's hand was still on her throat, controlling her head position, and every time she tried to escape left or right, he adjusted and cut off the angle. He was toying with her now, throwing punches hard enough to hurt, but not hard enough to end things immediately, drawing it out for the crowd's entertainment. Another body shot landed, then another, each one making it harder to breathe. Mara's vision was starting to tunnel. She could hear the crowd chanting something that sounded like "kill" in multiple languages. Battaglia was probably loving this, probably already planning how he'd use her failure to embarrass Vincent. Volkov pulled back his right hand for what looked like a finishing blow aimed at her head, and Mara spat blood directly into his eyes. It wasn't dignified or technical or anything they taught in gyms. It was pure desperation, the last-ditch move of someone with no other options. But it worked. Volkov's grip on her throat loosened for just a second as he blinked reflexively, trying to clear his vision. That second was all Mara needed. She drove her knee up into Volkov's groin with every ounce of strength she had left. The big man grunted, the first sound of pain she'd heard from him, and his posture straightened slightly. Mara didn't wait to see how much damage she'd done. She ducked under his arms, spun to his back, and jumped onto him like a backpack, her arms wrapping around his neck, her legs hooking around his waist. She was going for a rear naked choke, the same submission that had ended her first fight. If she could sink it in, if she could lock it before Volkov recovered. Volkov reached back, grabbed a handful of her hair, and threw himself backward. They both crashed to the canvas with Mara underneath, her back and head taking Volkov's full weight plus the impact. Something in her back popped. Her grip on his neck loosened involuntarily, and Volkov rolled free, both fighters scrambling to their feet. Mara's back was on fire. Every breath sent spikes of pain through her ribs. Her left arm was barely functional. The cut above her eye from the Knox fight had reopened, and blood was running into her vision again. She'd been in the cage with Volkov for maybe 3 minutes, and she was already more damaged than she'd been after 2 complete fights. But Volkov wasn't unmarked anymore either. He was blinking rapidly, still trying to clear the blood from his eyes. And he was favoring his right leg slightly. The knee to the groin had done some damage, even if he was too tough to show it, obviously. More importantly, he wasn't smiling anymore. The casual, predatory amusement had been replaced by something colder. Anger, maybe. Or respect for prey that had proven more difficult than expected. "You fight dirty," he said, wiping blood from his face. "Good. Makes it interesting." Then he came at her again, but this time with real intent. No more toying, no more entertainment, just efficient, brutal violence designed to end the fight as quickly as possible. Mara barely survived the next minute. Volkov threw combinations that would have knocked out a horse, mixing punches with elbows and knees in patterns that gave her no time to counter, only defend. She blocked what she could, dodged what she couldn't block, and took the rest on parts of her body that could maybe absorb the damage without shutting down completely. A right cross glanced off her temple. A left hook to the body drove the air from her lungs. A knee caught her thigh and her leg went partially numb. She was being systematically dismantled, and there was nothing she could do except survive and hope for an opening. The opening came when Volkov overcommitted on a haymaker right hand that had knockout written all over it. Mara ducked under it, barely, her reaction slowed by accumulated damage, and Volkov's momentum carried him past her. For maybe half a second, his back was exposed. Mara jumped on it, literally. She leapt onto his back again, both arms snaking around his neck, her legs locking around his waist like a vice. But this time she didn't try for the choke immediately. This time she just held on, using her weight to pull backward, to upset his balance, to drag him down to the ground where size mattered less. Volkov tried to stay upright, tried to reach back and grab her, but Mara had positioned herself perfectly, high on his back, arms locked, legs squeezing to prevent him from generating power. He stumbled, caught himself, stumbled again. Then they both went down. They hit the canvas with Mara still on his back, and this time she went for the choke immediately. Her right arm slid across Volkov's throat, her left hand gripping her right wrist to reinforce it, her legs still locked around his waist. The rear naked choke was sinking in, cutting off blood flow to his brain. Volkov's hands went to her choking arm immediately, trying to create space. His strength was incredible. Even with the choke partially in, he was able to get his fingers under her forearm and pull. But Mara squeezed tighter, adjusting her angle, using her whole body to maintain the pressure. "Tap," she heard herself saying through gritted teeth. "Just tap." Volkov didn't tap, didn't make any sound at all except for strained breathing. He rolled, trying to crush Mara under his weight like he'd done before. But this time she'd anticipated it, kept her body aligned with his, maintained the choke through the roll. They ended up on their sides, still locked together. Volkov's face was turning red. His struggles were becoming more frantic, less controlled, The crowd was screaming, but Mara couldn't hear individual words anymore. Just a wall of noise that was either encouraging her or demanding her death. Impossible to tell which. Volkov's right hand shot back, fingers extended, going for her eyes. Mara turned her head just enough to protect her vision, felt his fingers scrape across her face, and squeezed the choke even tighter. His hand dropped. His body went rigid for a moment, then slack. Mara held the choke for 3 more seconds, long enough to be sure, not long enough to cause permanent damage, then released and scrambled away, exhausted and hurting and barely able to process what had just happened. Volkov lay motionless on the canvas for maybe 5 seconds. Then he coughed, gasped, and slowly pushed himself to his hands and knees. The referee was there immediately, checking him, asking questions in Russian that Volkov answered with a grunt and a nod. The crowd had gone silent. Not quiet. Silent. Like someone had hit a mute button on 300 people simultaneously. Then the referee raised Mara's hand, and the silence shattered into chaos. Half the crowd was cheering, the other half was booing or arguing or demanding recounts. Money was changing hands rapidly, some people celebrating windfalls, others looking like they'd just lost their houses. Mara heard at least 3 different fights breaking out in the stands, voices rising in anger and accusation, but all of that felt distant, unimportant. Mara's entire focus was on staying upright, on not collapsing now that the fight was over and adrenaline was draining from her system like water from a broken dam. Marcus was in the cage first, his massive arms steadying her before her legs could give out. Holy shit, Mara, you did it! You actually did it! Vincent was right behind him, his expression somewhere between shocked and impressed. Medical, now, before you pass out and we have to carry you. The walk from the cage to the medical area was a blur. Mara was aware of people staring, of conversations stopping as she passed, of someone trying to interview her and Marcus physically moving them out of the way. The prep room doctor took one look at her and immediately started calling for supplies. Possible fractured ribs, definite soft tissue damage to the left forearm, lacerations to the face and scalp, severe bruising across multiple areas, potential concussion. The doctor was listing her injuries like reading a grocery list. She needs a hospital, real hospital, not whatever field medicine we can provide here. No hospitals, Mara managed through split lips. Too many questions. You could have internal bleeding, then check for it here. I'm not going to a hospital where people will ask how this happened and want to file reports. The doctor looked at Vincent, who nodded. Check her here. But if you find anything life-threatening, hospital becomes non-negotiable. I don't care about questions. For the next 20 minutes, Mara endured the most thorough medical examination she'd ever received outside of an actual ER. X-rays from a portable machine that looked like it cost more than her apartment, ultrasound to check for internal bleeding, pupil response tests, range of motion assessments, blood pressure monitoring. The doctor poked and prodded every injury while making notes on a tablet and occasionally shaking his head. 3 ribs are fractured, he announced finally. Hairline fractures, not displaced but painful. Left radius has a green stick fracture, partial break, will heal but needs immobilization. Multiple contusions, lacerations, and hematomas that will hurt like hell for the next week. Mild concussion, but nothing immediately life-threatening. You're lucky, Miss Kincaid. Very lucky. Don't feel lucky, Mara muttered. The doctor wrapped her ribs again with fresh elastic bandages, put her left forearm in a splint, stitched the reopened cut above her eye, and added 2 more stitches to a new cut on her cheek. He gave her painkillers this time, prescription strength, the kind that came with warnings about operating heavy machinery, and strict instructions to rest for at least 2 weeks. No training, no strenuous activity, no fighting, he said sternly. Your body needs time to heal. Push it too soon and you'll cause permanent damage. Mara nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed him. Her body had healed from worse. Probably. When the doctor finally left, Vincent sat down next to her on the examination table. He looked tired, actually tired, not just his usual controlled weariness, like the night had taken something out of him too. $500,000, he said quietly. Winner's purse. It'll be in your account by Monday morning. Cash, clean, exactly what I promised. Mara tried to process that number and couldn't quite manage it. $500,000. More money than she'd made in her entire fighting career combined.
more money than she'd ever imagined having at one time. "Thank you," she said, because what else was there to say? "Don't thank me. You earned it. Every dollar." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "I've been running this tournament for 7 years, seen hundreds of fights, watched some of the toughest people in the country beat the hell out of each other. And that, what you just did against Volkov, was the most impressive thing I've ever witnessed. You shouldn't have won that fight. On paper, in reality, by any logical assessment, you should have lost in under 2 minutes. But you didn't. You found a way. I got lucky. Luck's part of it. But mostly it was skill and determination and refusing to quit when anyone else would have." Vincent stood, then paused. "There's something else. Battaglia left during your fight with Volkov. Didn't wait for the outcome. Didn't stick around to see the end. He and his people just walked out. Why? My guess? He realized the fix he'd been planning wasn't going to work. Or he saw you were actually going to win and didn't want to be here when it happened. Either way, he's gone. And I've got people making sure he knows that trying anything against you would be a very bad idea." Mara absorbed that information slowly. "So I'm safe? From him at least?" "From him, yeah. Sokolov's a different problem, but we'll handle that too. I made you a promise, and I keep my promises." Vincent checked his phone, frowned at something on the screen. "Speaking of which, there's someone here who wants to see you. Says it's urgent. Old friend of yours, apparently." Everything in Mara's body went cold. "Who?" "Didn't give a name.
Just said to tell you he's from Philadelphia, and he's been looking for you for 18 months. Viktor Sokolov. It had to be. Somehow he'd found her, tracked her here, and now he was outside waiting to collect his property. Mara tried to stand and nearly fell. Her legs wouldn't support her weight properly, the combination of exhaustion and injury making everything feel disconnected and unresponsive. "Vincent, I need to leave, now. Back door, side exit, anywhere." "Relax." Vincent's hand on her shoulder was gentle but firm. "He's not here to take you. He's here to talk. And I told him he could, but only with me present and only for 5 minutes. You want me to send him away, say the word, and he's gone." Mara's mind was racing. Sokolov wanted to talk? That didn't make sense. Men like him didn't talk. They collected, they punished, they enforced. Unless this was some kind of trap, some way to get her to lower her guard before— "Let me meet him first," Vincent said, reading her panic. "Alone. I'll get a sense of what he wants, whether this is legitimate or a setup. You wait here with Marcus. If anything feels wrong, we're gone. Understood?" Mara wanted to argue, wanted to run, wanted to be anywhere except in a building where Viktor Sokolov apparently was. But her body wouldn't cooperate, and Vincent's logic made sense. He'd protected her this far. She had to trust he'd continue. 5 minutes, she said. "If you're not back in 5 minutes, I'm assuming the worst." Vincent nodded and left. Marcus appeared moments later, taking up position by the door with his arms crossed, and his expression making it very clear that nobody was getting past him without a fight. The 5 minutes lasted approximately 10 years. Mara sat on the examination table, every injury throbbing in time with her heartbeat, listening to the muffled sounds of the crowd dispersing outside. The tournament was over. She'd won. She should have been celebrating, or at least relieved. Instead, she was terrified that everything she'd fought for was about to be ripped away by the man she'd been running from for 18 months. When Vincent finally returned, he wasn't alone. The man who followed him into the room wasn't Viktor Sokolov. He was younger, maybe 40, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of hard living. Short dark hair, gray at the temples, expensive suit that didn't quite hide the athletic build underneath, and eyes that Mara recognized immediately, even though she'd never seen this particular man before. Fighter's eyes, the kind that assessed threats automatically and calculated angles of attack without conscious thought. "Mara Kincaid," the man said, his voice carrying a faint accent she couldn't quite place. "It's good to finally find you. My name is Anton Fedorov. I work for Viktor Sokolov." Mara's hands clenched into fists despite the pain it caused. "If you're here to collect, you're wasting your time. I'm not going back." "I'm not here to collect." Fedorov glanced at Vincent, who nodded permission for him to continue. "I'm here to deliver a message from Mr. Sokolov. He's been watching your fights tonight. We have contacts who live stream these tournaments. He saw what you did. saw you beat 3 men who should have destroyed you, and he wanted you to know that he's impressed. Impressed. Mara's voice was flat. That's why he put a $100,000 bounty on my head? Because he was impressed? The bounty was about principle, about not letting investments walk away without consequences. But principles can be renegotiated when circumstances change. Fedorov pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and set it on the examination table. Mr. Sokolov wants to make you an offer. The bounty is canceled, effective immediately. Your debt to him is considered paid in full. In exchange, he wants you to consider working with him again, not as an owned fighter, but as a partner. Independent contractor rates, complete autonomy, freedom to accept or decline individual fights. Mara stared at the envelope like it might contain a bomb.
Why would he do that?
Because you're valuable, and Mr. Sokolov recognizes value when he sees it. Tonight you proved you're not just talented, you're exceptional, and exceptional people deserve exceptional treatment. Fedorov's expression didn't change, but something in his tone suggested he was delivering words he'd been instructed to say rather than ones he believed. The envelope contains details of his proposal, contact information, and a cashier's check for $25,000 as a gesture of good faith. Good faith. Mara laughed, though it hurt her ribs. He ruined my life, forced me to fight in illegal circuits, turned me into something I hated, and now he wants me to believe he's operating in good faith? I'm just the messenger, Miss Kincaid. What you do with the message is your decision. Fedorov turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I watched your fight against Volkov. You're either the bravest person I've ever seen or the craziest. Either way, you've earned respect in circles that don't give it easily. That counts for something. Then he was gone, leaving Mara alone with Vincent, Marcus, and an envelope she didn't want to touch. Vincent picked it up, examined it, then offered it to Mara. Want me to open it? Burn it. Mara? Burn it, Vincent. I don't care what's inside. I don't care about his offer or his good faith or his respect. I ran from that man for 18 months because working for him turned me into a monster. I'm not going back. Not for money, not for autonomy, not for anything. Vincent studied her face for a long moment, then nodded and handed the envelope to Marcus. Get rid of it. And make sure Fedorov knows that if Sokolov or anyone working for him comes near Mara again, it becomes my problem. And I solve my problems permanently. Marcus left with the envelope, and Mara felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. The threat wasn't gone. Sokolov wasn't the type to accept rejection gracefully, but at least the immediate danger had passed. You okay? Vincent asked. No, but I will be. Mara looked at him, this crime boss who'd somehow become the closest thing to a friend she'd had in years. The money from the tournament, the $500,000. I meant what I said before. If anything happens to me, if Sokolov comes back or something goes wrong, make sure it goes somewhere useful. Nothing's going to happen to you. We had a deal, remember? Protection in exchange for fighting. You held up your end. Now I hold up mine. And how exactly do you plan to protect me from an organization that operates across 6 states? Vincent's smile was cold and didn't reach his eyes. By making it very clear that you're under my protection, and anyone who touches you answers to me. Sokolov's powerful on the East Coast, but this is Chicago. My city, my territory. And I've been building relationships with people who make him look like a small-time operator. If he wants to test whether his reputation can survive a war with me, he's welcome to try. But I don't think he will. You'd go to war for me? I'd go to war for what you represent. You walked into my club 3 weeks ago as nobody. Now you're the woman who won my tournament, who beat Dmitry Volkov, who refused to quit no matter how badly you were hurt. That story matters. It proves something about the kind of people I associate with, the kind of organization I run. So yeah, I'll protect you. Not just because I promised, but because letting Sokolov take you would make me look weak. And I don't do weak. It was the most honest thing Vincent had said to her since they'd met. Not comforting exactly. His motives were still ultimately selfish, but at least it was truth. And truth was valuable in a world where most people only trafficked in lies. Thank you, Mara said again. Stop thanking me and start thinking about what comes next. You've got $500,000, a growing reputation in underground fighting circuits, and skill that people will pay serious money for. Question is, what do you want to do with all that? Mara had been so focused on survival, on getting through each day without being found, that she hadn't thought about the future in any concrete way. What did she want? The honest answer was simple. She wanted to stop running, wanted to wake up without fear, wanted to build something that was hers and couldn't be taken away. "I want what you offered before," she said slowly. "Security work, training your people. Something legitimate that uses my skills without turning me back into what I was." Vincent nodded. "Done. You'll work directly for me. Personal security, close protection when I need it, training for my people who think they're tough until someone like you proves otherwise. Pays $60,000 base, plus bonuses for special assignments. Health insurance, clean employment records, and a legitimate cover story that explains your income without raising questions." 60,000? Mara had been making maybe 25 working waitress jobs. The jump was dizzying. "You're worth more, but let's start there and adjust as needed. You're still recovering, still getting your feet under you. We can renegotiate in 6 months when you've proven what you can do." Vincent checked his phone again. "For now, you need rest. Marcus is going to drive you home, and I'm posting security outside your building for the next week. Overkill, probably, but I'd rather be paranoid than attend your funeral. I don't need non-negotiable. You work for me now, which makes you my responsibility. Get used to it." Mara was too exhausted to argue. She let Vincent help her off the examination table, let Marcus steady her when her legs wobbled, and walked out of the warehouse into the cold Chicago night, with her entire life fundamentally changed. The ride back to her apartment was quiet. Marcus drove with one hand, the other resting on the center console, within easy reach of what Mara suspected was a gun. They passed through neighborhoods that had looked threatening 3 weeks ago, but now just looked tired. Graffiti-covered buildings and shuttered storefronts, people huddled around barrel fires, the detritus of poverty that Chicago tried to hide but could never quite eliminate. When they pulled up to her building, Marcus killed the engine and turned to face her. "What you did tonight, beating Volkov, that's going to follow you. People are going to hear about it, want to test themselves against you, see if you're as good as the stories say. Some of them will be respectful, some won't. You need to be ready for that." "I know." "Do you? Because being the underdog who surprises everyone is different from being the champion everyone wants to dethrone. The target on your back just got a lot bigger." Mara met his eyes. "Marcus, I've had a target on my back for 18 months. At least now I've got the means to defend myself and people willing to back me up. That's an improvement." Marcus grunted, which might have been agreement or skepticism. "Vincent's serious about protecting you, by the way. I've worked for him for 8 years, seen him make a lot of promises. He keeps the ones that matter. You matter." "Why? Because I make him look good?" "Because you surprised him. Vincent doesn't surprise easy. Most people are predictable, and he's smart enough to predict them. But you? You keep doing things he doesn't expect. That's rare. That's interesting. And Vincent collects interesting things." There was probably a warning in there somewhere about being treated as a possession rather than a person, but Mara was too tired to parse it. She just thanked Marcus, climbed out of the SUV with movements that felt like broken glass grinding in her joints, and made her way upstairs to her apartment. The place looked exactly as she'd left it, shabby, cramped, depressing. But for the first time since she'd moved in, it didn't feel temporary. It felt like the beginning of something instead of a hiding place between disasters. Mara stripped off her blood-stained clothes, stood under a shower that was either too hot or too cold with no in-between, and watched pink water swirl down the drain. Every injury the doctor had cataloged made itself known in precise detail. Her ribs were agony. Her face felt like it had been used as a punching bag, which wasn't far from the truth. The splinted forearm throbbed in time with her heartbeat, but she'd won. Against every odd, despite every disadvantage, she'd won. And in winning, she'd bought herself something more valuable than money. She'd bought herself a future. Mara dried off carefully, put on the softest clothes she owned, and collapsed into bed. Sleep came immediately, pulling her under like a riptide, and for the first time in 18 months, her dreams weren't about running. They were about standing still, about planting roots, about becoming someone who didn't have to hide anymore. The warehouse raid happened 4 days after the tournament. Mara was still sleeping off the worst of her injuries when her phone rang at 3 in the morning. She fumbled for it in the dark, wincing as the movement pulled at her fractured ribs, and saw Vincent's name on the screen. Yeah? Her voice was rough with sleep and pain medication. Get dressed. Marcus is picking you up in 10 minutes. Bring nothing you can't leave behind. Vincent's voice was clipped, urgent. No small talk, no explanation. What's happening? Sokolov didn't accept the rejection as gracefully as we'd hoped. He's got people in the city. We're handling it tonight. The call ended before Mara could respond. She was dressed in 8 minutes, jeans, dark hoodie, boots she could run in if necessary. The splint on her left arm made everything awkward, but she managed. Her ribs protested every movement, and the painkillers had worn off hours ago, leaving her operating on adrenaline and fear. Marcus arrived exactly on time, the SUV idling outside her building with its lights off. Mara climbed in to find Vincent in the passenger seat, dressed in all black like he was going to war, which she realized he probably was. Sokolov sent 8 people to Chicago, Vincent said without preamble as Marcus pulled away from the curb. They arrived yesterday, rented a warehouse in Pilsen, and they've been asking questions about you, showing your photo, offering money for information. My people tracked them down about 2 hours ago. And now what? You're going to confront them? I'm going to send a message. One clear enough that Sokolov understands continuing this vendetta is bad for business. Vincent turned to look at her, his face illuminated by passing streetlights. I need you to understand something. What's about to happen? It's going to be violent. People will get hurt. Maybe worse. You can walk away right now, go back to your apartment, and I'll handle this without you. No judgment, no consequences. Mara's hands were shaking again. She clenched them into fists. Why bring me at all then? Because this is about you, your past, your freedom. You deserve to be there when we end it, but only if you choose to be. The SUV drove through empty Chicago streets, past closed shops and darkened apartments, toward whatever confrontation Vincent had planned. Mara thought about the woman from Croatia, about the underground fights that had turned her into something she'd hated, about 18 months of running and hiding and being afraid. I'm not walking away, she said. Not anymore. Vincent nodded like he'd expected that answer. Then you need to know the rules. You watch, you don't participate. Your arm's broken, your ribs are fractured, and you're not in any condition to fight. Marcus and I handle the physical side. Your job is to identify anyone you recognize from your time with Sokolov, provide information if needed, and make a choice at the end. What kind of choice? You'll see when we get there. The warehouse was in an industrial area that made the tournament venue look upscale by comparison. Chain-link fencing surrounded the building, most of it knocked down or rusted through. Broken windows on the upper floors. Graffiti covering every available surface. The kind of place where bad things happened and nobody asked questions afterward. 2 of Vincent's people were already there, a woman named Elena who Mara had seen at the Velvet Throne, and a man she didn't recognize. They were positioned near the building's entrance, watching, waiting. 8 targets inside, Elena reported quietly. 3 on the ground floor, 2 upstairs, 3 in what looks like a makeshift office in the back, armed. We've seen at least 4 handguns, and possibly more. No sign they're expecting trouble. Vincent absorbed this information with the calm of someone who'd done this before. Entry plan? Front and back simultaneously. Cut the power first. Night vision for us. Confusion for them. Standard containment protocol. Good. Marcus, you take the back entrance with Elena. I'll take front with Dmitri. He glanced at Mara. You stay in the SUV until we signal all clear. Then and only then do you come inside. Mara wanted to argue but recognized the logic. She was a liability right now, not an asset. How will I know when it's clear? You'll know. Vincent and his team moved with practiced efficiency. They surrounded the building, positioned themselves at entry points, communicated through earpieces and voices too low for Mara to hear from inside the SUV. Then the lights in the warehouse went out, plunging everything into darkness. What followed lasted maybe 3 minutes, but felt eternal. Mara heard shouting first, Russian voices raised in alarm and confusion. Then gunshots, 3 of them in rapid succession, followed by the sounds of physical confrontation. Breaking glass, bodies hitting concrete, someone screaming in pain, then silence. The silence was somehow worse than the violence. Mara's phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Clear. Come to the back office. She climbed out of the SUV on shaky legs and made her way to the warehouse entrance. The front door hung open, barely attached to its hinges. Inside, the building was dark except for flashlights held by Vincent's people. Mara could make out shapes on the ground. Bodies, she realized with a sick lurch in her stomach. Some moving, some not. Marcus appeared from the shadows and gestured for her to follow. Watch your step. Floor's unstable in places. They walked through the warehouse toward the back, passing two of Sokolov's people who'd been zip-tied and left sitting against a wall. One had blood running from his nose. The other was unconscious or pretending to be. Neither looked particularly threatening now. The office was in better shape than the rest of the building. Actual walls instead of just open space. A door that closed. Even some furniture that looked like it had been brought in recently. Vincent stood in the center of the room, his suit somehow still immaculate despite whatever violence he'd just participated in. At his feet, zip-tied and kneeling, was Anton Fedorov. The man who'd delivered Sokolov's offer 4 days ago looked different now. His expensive suit was torn and dirty. His face was bruised, blood trickling from a split lip. But his eyes were still alert, still calculating, still looking for angles and opportunities. "Miss Kincaid," he said when Mara entered, "I'd hoped we wouldn't meet again under these circumstances." "You came after me." Mara's voice was flat. "Sokolov sent you anyway, even after I rejected his offer." "Mr. Sokolov doesn't accept rejection well, I'm sure you remember." Fedorov shifted his weight, the zip ties cutting into his wrists. He wanted to send a message that running from him has consequences, that debts don't disappear just because you change cities. Vincent kicked Fedorov casually in the ribs. Not hard enough to break anything, just enough to hurt. "He's lying. We found communications on his phone. Sokolov didn't just want to send a message. He wanted you brought back to Philadelphia. Dead or alive, preferably alive, so he could make an example." Mara felt cold rage building in her chest. "After everything I did for him, after all the fights, all the money I made him." "You were property," Fedorov interrupted, his voice matter-of-fact despite the pain. "Valuable property, yes, but property nonetheless. And Mr. Sokolov doesn't let his property walk away. It sets a bad precedent." "Shut up," Marcus said, and his tone suggested that continuing to talk would be a very bad idea. Fedorov shut up. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed Mara the screen. It displayed a text conversation between Fedorov and someone labeled only as VS, presumably Viktor Sokolov. The messages were damning: instructions to locate Mara, authorization to use force if necessary, promises of bonuses for successful retrieval. The most recent message, sent just hours ago: "Found her. Moving tomorrow night. Will deliver by Friday." "He was planning to take you Thursday," Vincent said. "Probably would have succeeded too if my people hadn't been watching. Which brings us to the choice I mentioned earlier." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a handgun, checked the magazine, racked the slide, and held it out to Mara grip first. "Fedorov's organization killed 2 of my people during the raid tonight. Shot them while they were trying to surrender. That's a debt that needs to be paid. The question is who pays it and how." Vincent's expression was neutral, but his eyes were watching Mara carefully. Option 1. I handle this. Fedorov and his people disappear. Sokolov gets the message that Chicago is off limits, and you keep your hands clean. Option 2. You handle it. You pull the trigger, you take that weight, but you also take the power. You prove to Sokolov and everyone else that you're not a victim anymore. Mara stared at the gun. It was a Glock. She recognized the model from mandatory firearms training she'd done years ago. Simple, reliable, designed to kill efficiently. The weight of it in Vincent's hand looked wrong somehow, too small for the magnitude of what he was offering. "I'm not a killer," she said. "You put a woman in a care facility with brain damage. You beat 3 men unconscious in a single night. You've got blood on your hands already, Mara. The only question is whether you choose when and how to add more." Fedorov was watching this exchange with the expression of a man trying to calculate his survival odds and not liking the numbers. "Miss Kincaid, please. I was following orders. I didn't want—" "Following orders," Mara's voice cut through his pleading. "That's the excuse people always use when they do terrible things. Just following orders, just doing their job, just trying to survive. But you made choices. You chose to work for Sokolov, chose to come after me, chose to plan my kidnapping. Those were your choices." She took the gun from Vincent's hand. It was heavier than she expected. The grip felt foreign against her palm, wrong in a way that had nothing to do with the weapon itself and everything to do with what it represented. This wasn't a fight in a cage with rules and referees. This was execution. Murder, really, dressed up in the language of justice and consequences. Mara pointed the gun at Fedorov's head. Her hand wasn't shaking anymore. Everything had gone very calm, very still, like the moment before a fight when time stretched and every detail became hyper-real. "Please," Fedorov said again, "I have a family. 2 daughters. They're 9 and 12. If I don't come home, I had a life too," Mara interrupted. "A career, a future, people who cared about me. Sokolov took all of that, and you were helping him do it again. So don't talk to me about your daughters. Talk to me about why I shouldn't end this right now." Fedorov swallowed hard. "Because you're better than this. Better than Sokolov. Better than the life he forced you into. Killing me won't change what happened, won't give you back what you lost. It'll just make you into the thing you've been running from." The words hit harder than Mara wanted to admit. She'd spent 18 months running from Viktor Sokolov, but more than that, she'd been running from the person he'd turned her into, the fighter who broke bones for money, the woman who'd put someone in a care facility and then fled rather than face the consequences. If she pulled this trigger, if she killed Fedorov in cold blood while he knelt helpless and zip-tied, she'd become something worse than anything Sokolov had made her. She'd become a murderer by choice rather than circumstance. Mara lowered the gun. "I'm not doing this," she said, turning to Vincent. "I'm not killing him, but I'm not letting him go either." Vincent's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested approval. "What did you have in mind?" "Send him back to Sokolov, alive but with a message. Tell Sokolov that I'm under your protection now, that Chicago is off limits, and that if he sends anyone else after me, they won't be going home." Mara looked at Fedorov. "And tell him that I chose mercy, that I had the chance to kill his man and I didn't take it. Let him think about what that means." "Mercy is weakness," Fedorov said quietly. "Sokolov will see it as proof he can push harder. Then he'll learn he's wrong the hard way." Mara handed the gun back to Vincent. "I'm done being afraid of him, done running. If he wants to come after me again, let him try. But I'm not becoming a killer just to prove I'm not afraid." Vincent took the gun, safed it, and slipped it back into his jacket. "All right, we'll do it your way. Fedorov goes back to Philadelphia with my message, and enough broken fingers that Sokolov knows we're serious. The rest of his people, the ones who survived, they go back too. All except the 2 who killed my guys. Those debts get paid in full." Mara didn't ask what that meant, didn't want to know. Marcus hauled Fedorov to his feet and dragged him out of the office. Mara heard the man being loaded into a vehicle, heard engines starting, heard Vincent giving instructions in a voice too low to make out individual words. Then it was just Mara and Vincent, standing in a dirty office in an abandoned warehouse at 4 a.m, surrounded by the aftermath of violence. "You made the right choice," Vincent said after a long silence. "Killing Fedorov wouldn't have solved anything. Would have just made Sokolov more determined to hurt you. This way, you take the moral high ground, and we still send the message that you're not an easy target. I didn't do it for strategy. I did it because I'm tired of violence, tired of being the person who hurts people." Then you're in the wrong line of work. Security, protection, training, it's all predicated on the willingness to use violence when necessary. Necessary being the key word. Fedorov was helpless. Killing him wouldn't have been necessary. It would have just been revenge. Vincent nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But understand that not everyone will see it your way. Some people will think you're weak for not pulling that trigger. Battaglia, for instance. He'll hear about this, and he'll think it means you can be pushed. Let him think that. He'll learn otherwise if he tries." "Maybe." Vincent checked his phone, frowned at something on the screen. "Speaking of Battaglia, we need to talk about him. He's become a problem that's not going away on its own." "What's he done now?" "Started spreading stories about you. Telling people the tournament was fixed, that you only won because I rigged the matchups. Says Volkov took a dive, that the whole thing was theater designed to make me look good." Vincent's jaw tightened. It's bullshit, and everyone with a brain knows it. But bullshit spreads, and enough people repeating it makes it start to sound like truth. Mara felt anger flare hot in her chest. "I won those fights, fair. No help, no interference. He was there. He saw what happened. He saw what he wanted to see. And now he's using it to undermine me, make me look weak or desperate, or whatever story serves his agenda. Vincent started walking toward the exit, gesturing for Mara to follow. The problem is, I can't just kill him. He's connected to people in New York who'd take that as an act of war. But I also can't let him keep spreading lies without consequences. So what do? I'm working on it. But in the meantime, you need to be aware that Batalia's people might try to provoke you. Start a fight, record it. Use it as proof that you're unstable or dangerous or whatever narrative he's building. Don't take the bait. They emerged from the warehouse into the pre-dawn darkness. The SUV was idling nearby, Marcus behind the wheel, looking tired but alert. Elena and the other team member were securing the building, probably erasing evidence and making sure nothing pointed back to Vincent's organization. The drive back to Mara's apartment was quiet. She watched Chicago slide past the windows, empty streets, closed storefronts, the occasional homeless person huddled in a doorway. The city looked different than it had 3 weeks ago. Less threatening. Or maybe she was just less afraid. When Marcus pulled up to her building, Vincent turned to face her. Take a week off, rest, heal, let the bones knit. After that, we'll start your actual training, not fighter training, security training, how to spot threats, how to protect clients, how to operate in situations where violence is the last resort instead of the first option. And the Sokolov situation, is it really over? Nothing's ever really over, but yeah, I think he got the message. Fedorov will deliver your mercy speech, Sokolov will see that Chicago's too expensive a target, and he'll move on to easier prey. If he doesn't, Vincent shrugged. Then we escalate. But I don't think it'll come to that. Mara climbed out of the SUV, her body protesting every movement. The splinted arm throbbed. Her ribs felt like they were being stabbed with each breath. The cut above her eye itched under its stitches. She was a walking catalog of injuries, and she'd never felt more alive. Vincent? She leaned back into the vehicle before closing the door. Thank you. For everything. For the opportunity, for the protection, for not judging me when I couldn't pull the trigger. Don't thank me yet. We've still got work to do. But Vincent was almost smiling when he said it. Get some sleep, Mara. You earned it. The week that followed was the quietest Mara had experienced in 18 months. She slept 12 hours a day, her body desperately trying to repair the damage from 3 brutal fights. She ate the food Vincent had delivered, actual nutritious meals instead of the ramen and canned soup she'd been living on. She watched television without constantly looking over her shoulder. She even called her landlord and paid him for the damages she'd mentioned, plus 3 months' rent in advance. On the 4th day, her bank account showed a deposit of exactly $500,000. Mara stared at the number on her phone screen for a solid 5 minutes, trying to make it feel real. $500,000. More money than most people saw in years. Enough to buy a house, start a business, live comfortably for a decade if she was careful. Instead, she did something she'd been planning since the night of the tournament. She called the care facility where the Croatian woman was being treated. It took 3 transfers and 20 minutes of explaining before she got through to someone who could discuss patient accounts. Mara identified herself as a former friend of the patient, expressed concern about outstanding medical bills, and asked what it would cost to ensure the woman received the best possible care for the next 10 years. The number the administrator gave her was substantial. Nearly $200,000 for long-term care, therapy, medical oversight, and quality of life improvements. Mara authorized the payment that afternoon. Anonymous donation, no name attached, just a wire transfer that would ensure the woman she'd hurt would never want for care or comfort. It didn't absolve her, didn't erase what she'd done or bring back the person the Croatian woman had been before that fight, but it was something. An acknowledgement of debt, a payment toward a balance that could never really be settled. When Marcus picked her up on the 8th day, 1 day later than Vincent had specified because her ribs needed the extra time, he noticed the change in her immediately. You look different, he said as she climbed into the SUV. Lighter, maybe. I made a payment I'd been avoiding. Feels good to have it settled. Marcus didn't ask for details, just nodded and drove toward the facility where Mara's new life would begin. The training center was nothing like the gym where she'd prepared for the tournament. This was a professional operation, multiple rooms dedicated to different skills, equipment that looked expensive and well-maintained, instructors who carried themselves with the confident precision of people who knew exactly how good they were. Vincent met her in the main training room where a dozen other people were running through drills that looked more like choreographed dances than combat training. Welcome to the real work. Over the next 6 months, you'll learn close protection, threat assessment, defensive driving, firearms qualification, and about 20 other skills that have nothing to do with fighting in cages. 6 months? You'll be working during the training too. Light assignments, always with a partner, nothing that puts you in serious danger. But yeah, 6 months minimum before I trust you to handle solo operations. Vincent gestured to a woman in her 40s who'd just finished demonstrating a disarming technique. That's Sarah Chen. She'll be your primary instructor. Former Secret Service, spent 15 years protecting people who had entire countries wanting them dead. If anyone can teach you to think like a bodyguard instead of a fighter, it's her. Sarah approached with a handshake that was firm but not aggressive. Mara Kincaid, I saw footage of your tournament fights. Impressive work, but terrible form for protection duty. You take too many risks, absorb too much damage. We're going to fix that. Over the next 3 months, Sarah Chen proceeded to break down everything Mara thought she knew about personal security and rebuild it from the ground up. The skills were different from fighting, less about destroying opponents and more about preventing confrontations entirely. Reading body language to spot threats before they materialized, positioning clients to minimize exposure, creating exit strategies for every situation, understanding that the best security was the kind where nothing happened at all. Mara threw herself into the training with the same intensity she'd brought to fighting. She learned to drive defensively at high speeds, to clear rooms efficiently, to communicate threats without causing panic. She qualified on 6 different firearms: handguns, shotguns, rifles, though Sarah emphasized that drawing a weapon meant security had already failed. Your job isn't to win fights, Sarah reminded her constantly. It's to prevent them. And when you can't prevent them, to end them as quickly and quietly as possible without collateral damage. It was humbling, realizing how much she didn't know, how many situations she'd have handled completely wrong if left to her fighting instincts. But gradually, she started to understand the difference between controlled violence and strategic protection. During those 3 months, Battaglia made his move. It happened at the Velvet Throne on a Friday night when Mara was working her first solo protection assignment, standing near Vincent during a business meeting with suppliers from Detroit. She was wearing professional clothes instead of fight gear, an earpiece instead of hand wraps, and her job was to watch the room and identify potential threats. She spotted Battaglia the moment he walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. Vincent's people at the door should have stopped him, should have known he wasn't on the approved list for tonight. But he'd brought 8 men with him. Enough muscle that the door security had made a judgment call to let him through rather than start a fight in the entrance. Battaglia made his way directly to Vincent's booth, his entourage fanning out to create a wall between them and the rest of the room. Mara's hand went to her earpiece immediately. Vincent, we have a problem. Battaglia just arrived with 8 men. They're blocking sight lines and creating a confrontation scenario. Vincent's response was calm. Noted. Stay close, but don't engage unless he makes physical contact. This is a power play, not an attack. Mara moved to Vincent's left side, positioning herself between him and Battaglia's nearest enforcer. The meeting Vincent had been conducting went silent, the Detroit suppliers looking uncomfortable at the sudden tension. Vincent Caruso, Battaglia said loudly enough for half the room to hear. We need to talk about the disrespect you've been showing me. The stories you've been spreading, the lies about my business operations. Vincent's expression didn't change. I don't spread stories, Battaglia. I deal in facts. And the fact is, you've been running your mouth about things you don't understand and making accusations you can't prove. Accusations? You mean like calling you out for fixing your tournament? For rigging fights to make your pet project look good? Battaglia gestured dismissively at Mara. Everyone knows she didn't really beat Volkov. Knows the whole thing was theater to boost your reputation. Mara felt her jaw clench but kept her expression neutral. This was the provocation Vincent had warned her about. Battaglia wanted her to react, to start a fight he could use against Vincent. She didn't take the bait. You're drunk or delusional, Vincent said flatly. Either way, you're disrupting my business. Leave now, and we'll forget this happened. Stay, and I'll have you removed.
You'll have me removed? Battaglia laughed. With what? Your broken waitress and the muscle you've got standing around pretending to be tough? I brought 8 men, Vincent. How many do you have in the building right now who'd actually fight for you? As if in answer, Marcus emerged from the back hallway, flanked by 6 other members of Vincent's security team. They didn't draw weapons, didn't make threats.
Just positioned themselves around the room in a formation that made it very clear how quickly they could isolate and neutralize Battalia's people. "I count 7, Vincent said mildly, plus Mara, who, as you might recall, beat 3 professional fighters in a single night, including a man who'd never lost. So even if this turned into a brawl, which it won't, because you're not that stupid, you'd be outnumbered and outmatched." The calculation was visible on Battalia's face. He'd come in expecting to intimidate Vincent, to force some kind of concession or apology. Instead, he'd walked into a situation where he was clearly outmaneuvered, but backing down would mean losing face, and men like Battaglia would rather escalate than admit defeat. "Fine," he said finally. "We'll leave. But this isn't over, Caruso. You've been running Chicago like it's your personal kingdom for too long. Change is coming. And when it does, you're going to wish you'd shown me more respect." He turned to leave, his men following, and for a moment Mara thought the confrontation was over. Then one of Battaglia's enforcers, young, probably early 20s with the kind of swagger that suggested he had more ego than sense, deliberately shoulder-checked Vincent as he passed. It was a stupid, juvenile move, the kind of disrespect that required response, or it set a precedent that Vincent could be touched without consequences. Mara reacted on pure instinct. Her hand shot out and grabbed the enforcer's shoulder, spinning him around to face her. "Apologize to Mr. Caruso." The enforcer looked at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. "The fuck did you say?" "You heard me. Apologize for the disrespect, and we'll forget this happened." "Or what? You'll do something about it?" The enforcer stepped closer, invading her personal space in a way that was clearly meant to intimidate.
You might have gotten lucky in some rigged fights, but out here in the real world, you're just another... Mara's palm strike caught him directly in the solar plexus. Not hard enough to cause serious damage. She'd learned control from Sarah Chen, but hard enough to fold him over and drive the air from his lungs. He dropped to his knees, gasping, and Mara was already stepping back into a defensive position before his friends could react.
"Anyone else want to continue this conversation?" she asked calmly. Battaglia's other enforcers looked ready to attack, but Battaglia himself held up a hand to stop them. "Interesting. Your pet does have teeth, after all." He looked at the enforcer who was still struggling to breathe. "Get up, Marco. We're leaving." They left. The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the Velvet Throne had witnessed what just happened. Vincent's security openly confronting Battaglia's people and winning without escalation. It was a message that would spread through Chicago's underground by morning. Vincent stood, straightened his jacket, and addressed the Detroit suppliers like nothing had happened. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. Where were we?" The meeting continued, but Mara's mind was racing. She just assaulted one of Battaglia's men in public, potentially started something that would escalate into exactly the kind of war Vincent had been trying to avoid. After the suppliers left, Vincent called Mara into his office. "That was either the smartest thing you've done or the stupidest," he said without preamble. "I can't decide which. He disrespected you, in your place. I couldn't let that stand. I know and appreciate the loyalty, but you also just painted a bigger target on yourself. Battaglia's not going to forget that you humiliated one of his people. Let him remember, I'm tired of walking on eggshells around men who think they can do whatever they want without consequences." Vincent actually smiled at that. "You're starting to sound like me. That's either character development or corruption. Hard to tell the difference sometimes." He pulled out a bottle of expensive whiskey and 2 glasses. "Battaglia's going to retaliate. Maybe not directly, maybe not soon, but it's coming. You ready for that? I've been ready for retaliation since the day I left Philadelphia. At least this time I'm not facing it alone." "No," Vincent agreed, pouring drinks. "You're not." The retaliation came 2 weeks later, but not in the way either of them expected. Mara was leaving the training center after an evening session when 3 unmarked police cars surrounded her in the parking lot. 6 officers emerged, guns drawn, shouting for her to get on the ground. She complied immediately. Sarah's training had covered police interactions extensively, and the first rule was always cooperate and survive. Within minutes, she was handcuffed and being loaded into the back of a cruiser while officers searched her car. "What's the charge?" she asked the officer who'd cuffed her. "Assault and battery. Witness says you attacked him unprovoked at a nightclub 2 weeks ago. Put him in the hospital with internal injuries." Marco, Battaglia's enforcer. The kid she'd palm-struck in the solar plexus. Apparently he'd decided to file charges, probably at Battaglia's instruction. At the police station, Mara exercised her right to remain silent and requested a lawyer. The one who showed up an hour later was a woman in an expensive suit who introduced herself as Jennifer Wu and said she represented Vincent Caruso's interests. "This is a setup," Jennifer explained after reviewing the charges. "The alleged victim, Marco Santini, filed a report claiming you attacked him without provocation, causing injuries that required hospitalization. He's got medical records showing bruised ribs, difficulty breathing, and documentation of treatment. On paper, it's a solid assault case." He shoulder-checked Vincent. "I defended my client. There were 50 witnesses, none of whom will testify to that version of events if they're smart. Battaglia's been talking to people, making it clear that supporting your story would be unhealthy for their futures." Jennifer tapped her pen against the notepad. "The good news is, this is clearly retaliation for a business dispute, and the prosecution knows it. They're not enthusiastic about moving forward. The bad news is, Battaglia's got connections, and those connections are pressuring them to make an example." "So what do we do?" "We negotiate. You plead down to a misdemeanor, pay a fine, promise to stay away from Marco Santini, and this goes away. It's not justice, but it's pragmatic." Mara wanted to fight it, wanted to stand on principle and force Battaglia to prove his lies in court. But Jennifer was right about the witnesses. Nobody would risk Battaglia's retaliation to defend her. And a trial meant publicity, meant dragging Vincent into a legal mess he didn't need. "Fine," she said. "Negotiate the plea. But I want something in return." "Such as?" "Restraining order against Battaglia and his people. If I'm staying away from Santini, they stay away from me. Mutual distance." Jennifer nodded. "I can work with that. Sit tight, don't say anything to anyone, and let me handle this." The plea deal was finalized within 48 hours. Mara pled guilty to misdemeanor assault, paid a $5,000 fine, and accepted a restraining order that went both ways. She stayed away from Battaglia's operations. He stayed away from her. Vincent's lawyers had somehow managed to make it mutual, despite her being the one with the criminal conviction. When she was released, Vincent was waiting outside the police station in his usual black suit, looking calm despite the fact that his head of security had just acquired a criminal record. "Well," he said as she climbed into the waiting SUV, "that was expensive and annoying, but it could have been worse." "I'm sorry. I should have controlled my temper better." "Probably. But in a weird way, this worked out in our favor. Battaglia played his hand, showed that he's willing to use the legal system as a weapon, and all he got was a misdemeanor conviction and a restraining order that limits his own movements as much as yours. Meanwhile, everyone in our world knows why this really happened, knows he went crying to the cops instead of handling things like a man. That's not a good look for him." Mara settled into the leather seat, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "What happens now?" "Now you finish your training, take your final certifications, and start working as a full member of my security team. The criminal record actually helps in some ways, makes you look more legitimate, less like someone playing dress-up." Vincent glanced at her. "Unless you want out. The conviction gives you an excuse to walk away, start fresh somewhere else. I wouldn't blame you." "I'm not walking away. I'm done running, remember?" "Then welcome to the family, such as it is." The next 6 months passed quickly. Mara completed her training, earned certifications in executive protection and advanced security operations, and started taking regular assignments protecting Vincent and his associates. The work was usually boring, standing around while Vincent conducted meetings, driving him to appointments, watching for threats that rarely materialized. But occasionally, it got interesting. Like the night Dmitry Volkov showed up at the Velvet Throne asking to speak with Mara. She was working the door when he arrived, massive and scarred, and somehow looking even more dangerous in civilian clothes than he had in fight gear. Mara's hand went to her earpiece automatically, but Volkov held up both hands in a gesture of peace. "I am not here for trouble," he said in his heavy accent. "I come to talk. 5 minutes of your time, yes?" Mara studied his face, looking for signs of deception or violence, and found only what looked like genuine curiosity. 5 minutes. But we stay in public, and if you make any moves I don't like, this conversation ends. Fair. They sat at the bar, Volkov looking absurdly large on the normal-sized stool. He ordered vodka, straight. Mara stuck with water. I have thought about our fight many times since that night, Volkov said after taking a sip of his drink. How you survived when you should not have. How you found victory when every advantage was mine. It bothers me, this thing. Keeps me awake sometimes, trying to understand. Understand what? How you were not afraid. I have fought many people, men twice your size, professional soldiers, criminals who kill without hesitation. All of them showed fear when they faced me, but you... He shook his head. You were afraid, yes. I could see it, but you fought anyway, chose courage over safety. This is a rare thing. Mara considered his words. I was terrified. Every second of that fight I thought you were going to kill me, but I'd spent 18 months being afraid, running from things I couldn't face. I was tired of it. So yeah, I chose to fight despite the fear. Didn't seem like much of a choice at the time. Was greatest choice of all. This is what separates warriors from fighters. Fighters need confidence, need to believe they will win. Warriors fight because fighting is necessary, win or lose. Volkov finished his vodka and signaled for another. I came to tell you this. You have my respect, and in my world, respect is not given lightly. Why does it matter? Why come all this way just to say that? Because respect between warriors is a sacred thing. Because I want you to know that if you ever need help, real help, life or death help, you call me. I will come. This is debt I owe for the lesson you taught me. What lesson? Volkov smiled, and for the first time Mara saw something human beneath the monster exterior. That size and strength are not everything. That courage and skill can overcome advantage. That I am not invincible, no matter what my reputation says. He stood, leaving cash on the bar for both drinks. Stay dangerous, Mara Kincaid. World needs more warriors like you. Then he left, disappearing into the Chicago night, and Mara sat at the bar trying to process the fact that one of the most dangerous men she'd ever faced had just offered his friendship. The final piece fell into place 9 months after the tournament. Mara was protecting Vincent during a meeting with associates from New York when she recognized one of the men in their entourage. Not immediately. He'd changed his appearance, lost weight, grown a beard, but the eyes were unmistakable. Anton Fedorov. He recognized her at the same moment, and something passed between them. Not hostility, exactly. More like mutual acknowledgement of shared history. After the meeting, Fedorov approached her while Vincent was distracted with other business. Miss Kincaid, you look well, healed. What are you doing here? I thought you went back to Sokolov. I did. Delivered your message, showed him my broken fingers, explained that Chicago was protected territory. Fedorov flexed his left hand, and Mara could see the fingers didn't quite straighten properly anymore. He was displeased. Decided I had failed him. Decided failures needed to be punished. So you left. So I escaped. Barely. Came to New York, offered my services to people who appreciated my skills more than my former employer did. Fedorov's expression was unreadable. I owe you a debt, Miss Kincaid. You could have killed me that night. Probably should have. But you chose mercy. That choice saved my life. Gave me time to see what Sokolov had become, to understand that working for him was death sentence either way. I didn't do it for you. I did it for myself. Because I was tired of being the person who killed. I know. But result is same. You gave me chance at different life, and I took it. So now I repay debt. Sokolov is dead. The words took a moment to register. What? Sokolov is dead. Killed 3 weeks ago in Philadelphia by rival organization. His empire is being divided among various parties. His fighters scattered, his operations shut down. The bounty on your head, all bounties he issued, are void. You are free, Miss Kincaid. Completely, finally free. Mara felt something loosen in her chest. A tension she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Viktor Sokolov was dead. The man who'd controlled her, who'd turned her into a weapon, who'd haunted her dreams for 18 months, gone. How? she managed. Does it matter? He made enemies. Many enemies. Eventually, one of them succeeded where others failed. Fedorov glanced toward where Vincent was concluding his business. I thought you should know. Thought you deserved to hear it from someone who understood what his death means for you. Thank you. Fedorov nodded and turned to leave, then paused. The woman from Croatia. The one you injured in the underground fight. I heard she received anonymous donation, large enough to cover her care for years. Was that you? Mara didn't answer. Thought so. Is good thing you did. Cannot undo damage, but shows you are trying to be better person than circumstances forced you to become. This too is rare. Fedorov offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Mara shook it. Perhaps we will meet again someday, Miss Kincaid, under better circumstances. Perhaps. That night, Mara stood on the roof of her apartment building, not the shabby studio she'd lived in when she first arrived, but a nicer place Vincent had helped her find in a better neighborhood, and looked out over Chicago. The city sprawled beneath her, lights stretching to the horizon, millions of lives being lived in the spaces between buildings and streets. She'd come here 18 months ago with nothing. No money, no identity, no future except hiding and running and hoping to stay invisible long enough to survive. Now she had a career, a home, people who depended on her and whom she could depend on in return. She had skills that were valued, respect that was earned, and freedom that had been bought with blood and pain and choices that still kept her awake some nights. Viktor Sokolov was dead. Battaglia was neutralized. The tournament victory had become legend in Chicago's underground, her name spoken with equal parts fear and respect. She'd survived everything that should have destroyed her and come out stronger on the other side. But more than that, she'd found something she hadn't expected to find. She'd found herself. Not the fighter Sokolov had created. Not the victim who'd fled Philadelphia in the night. Not the waitress hiding from her past. But someone new. Someone who could face danger without flinching, who could choose mercy over vengeance, who could build a life on her own terms instead of accepting whatever circumstances dealt her. The rooftop door opened behind her, and Vincent emerged carrying 2 cups of coffee. He'd started showing up at her apartment occasionally, not romantically, just checking in, making sure she was adjusting to her new life. It was the closest thing to friendship either of them seemed capable of. Fedorov told you about Sokolov, he said, handing her one of the cups. It wasn't a question. Yeah, seems wrong to be happy about someone's death, but I won't pretend I'm not relieved. Oh, relieved is fine. Human, even. Vincent sipped his coffee, looking out at the city. You know what this means, right? With Sokolov gone, you could leave. Start over somewhere else. Use your tournament winnings to build whatever life you wanted. You're not obligated to stay here, work for me, keep doing security. Mara considered that. She had options now, real options. Could go anywhere, do anything, become whoever she wanted to be. I'm staying, she said. Chicago's home now. This life, complicated and dangerous as it is, it's mine. I built it. I'm not walking away from it. Vincent smiled. Good, because I've been thinking about expanding operations, opening another club, maybe 2. Need someone I trust to handle security for the new locations. Someone who understands the business, can handle threats, won't fold under pressure. Pays $90,000 a year plus bonuses. Interested? That's a promotion. That's recognition of value. You've proven yourself a dozen times over. Time to start treating you like the asset you are instead of the refugee you were. Vincent finished his coffee and set the cup on the roof's edge. Think about it. Let me know next week. No pressure. He left, and Mara stood alone on the roof with the city spread out below her and possibilities stretching into the future like roads she hadn't traveled yet. 3 years ago, she'd been Mara Kincaid, rising MMA fighter with championship aspirations and a future that looked limitless. 18 months ago, she'd been nobody, hiding under a fake name, working for minimum wage, hoping to survive long enough to figure out what came next. Tonight, she was Mara Kincaid again, but different, stronger. Not because she'd never been broken, but because she'd put herself back together with materials harder than what she'd started with. She pulled out her phone and sent Vincent a text. I accept. When do I start? His response came within seconds. Monday, welcome to management. Mara looked out at Chicago one more time, her city now, for better or worse, and smiled. She'd stopped running, planted roots, built something that was hers, and she'd done it all on her own terms. The scared waitress who'd spilled drinks on a crime boss was gone, replaced by a woman who fought her way from survival to power and refused to apologize for either. Somewhere in the distance, the sun was starting to rise. A new day, a new beginning. Mara Kincaid was ready for whatever came next.